So good morning everyone and welcome to the ordinary meeting of the 29th of April on this lovely crisp autumn day. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask you to be upstanding and I'll call upon Councillor Petrie to give the acknowledgement of the Traditional Custodians.
Yes, thank you Mr Chairman, and it's a great privilege and honour. On behalf of Council, I'd like to start by acknowledging the Traditional Custodians of the Sunshine Coast local government area, the Kabi Kabi peoples of the coastal plains and the northern hinterland, and on those whose traditional lands we gather today, and the Jinnaburra peoples of the southern hinterland. We wish to pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the important role First Nations people continue to play within the Sunshine Coast community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Craig. Councillors, stay outstanding, please, ladies and gentlemen, while we have the prayer, and I believe that we have Pastor Jonathan Guller from the Sunshine Church, Woombye, to read a prayer. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks very much. Heavenly Father, it is an absolute privilege to call this place home, and it's a privilege to be able to serve the people that live here as well. And I commit these men and women to you today, knowing that the decisions they make affect real people's lives and make a difference for future generations. I'm asking for your wisdom upon the conversations today, your grace upon their lives, and your blessing upon them in all their endeavours. And considering those in whom we lead and who we get the chance to serve, we lift all them to you as well, every family, every young person to older person, that they would know your grace and your peace and your life during such a times as these. We lift all this to you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking the trouble to come to us. Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, we'll stay upstanding because as is convention in these occasions, we will need to recognise the passing of the Duke of Edinburgh with a minute's silence. So councillors, we will observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect in acknowledging the passing of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh on the 9th of April 2021. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. So on to item 3, and just to, as you would have noticed, the Mayor is an apology for the first hour or so of the meeting, but he will be joining us later. So if I'd now like to move on to item 4, which is the receipt and confirmation of the minutes. So I'd like to ask that somebody move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 25th of March 2021 and, if I may, I'll use the two together, the special meeting of Queensland candidature to host the 2032 Olympics and Paralympic Games held on 15th of April be received and confirmed. Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Seconded, Councillor Johnston. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. There is not a mayoral minute, and we'll just move on to, may I remind you, councillors, that on the 12th of October 2020, amendments to the Local Government Act 2009 and Local Government Regulation of 2012 came into force. The amendments include the new Chapter 5B, which sets out new legislative requirements for dealing with councillors' conflict of interest in local government matters. These matters apply now as to how we manage such matters during this meeting. So I should remember that as we come to different items. Move on to item 7, presentations, and I believe, Councillor Suarez, you have a presentation. Sorry. So Councillor Cox, presentation on the environment livability strategy being recognised.
Yes,
over to you.
Thank you, Mr Chair. What an occasion this is this morning. A few weeks ago, Councillor Suarez, the Mayor, myself, CEO and obviously a number of our staff attended a virtual gala which was the 2020 Banksia Awards. Now, for anyone that doesn't know what the Banksia Award is, it's the longest running sustainability awards and very prestigious, certainly held in high acclaim within Australia, but also globally. And at that particular event, we were actually a finalist in the Government Award. And obviously, you can see before me, I've got this wonderful trophy to present to the staff. And we actually won that particular category. But not only did we win the 2020 Government Award, that comes after winning the 2019 Government Award. So that's 2 years in a row that we have won this very prestigious award. I don't think there's too many councils in Australia, out of the 537 councils in Australia, that could actually demonstrate that sort of merit. So I would actually like to invite some of the staff that are here today. I can see Gillian Smith, Robin Douglas, Dr. Dave Moore, and if I could invite you up, I'll present this to you. But I'd also like to invite Bill Hadrill, because Bill Hadrill was the manager of that department when the Environment and Liveability Strategy, which is what we won the award for, which is demonstrating our commitment to our local environment. So that Environment and Liveability Strategy has won numerous awards, including this one. Some of the great work that's been done as part of that is working with our community to further the Blue Heart, the carbon sequestration project up at Councillor Suarez's area in Division 9. There's a whole extra gamut of awards, and this here I think is great recognition for the team, and I'd just like to invite them up and Councillor Suarez up, and we'll present this award to the staff. Who wants to hold that one? Jump in. I think we're getting a photo. Well done, team.
And perhaps, Councillor, if we can show our appreciation through acclamation. Thank you, Councillor Cox, and congratulations to you and Councillor Suarez in your portfolio roles. A very important aspect of this region's identity. Councillors, we'll move on to item 8.1, and I believe we have a declaration of interest. My apologies, I do have to get a mover. Councillor Cox, seconded. Councillor Suarez. All those in favour of receipt of the award? Thank you, that's unanimous. My apologies, councillors. Back to item 8.1 and declarations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I do have a declarable conflict of interest in this item. I, Councillor Jason O'Prey, notify that I have a declarable conflict of interest in agenda item 8.1 to be considered at the ordinary meeting on 29 April 21 due to the fact that the report seeks to establish a new sponsorship agreement with the Sunshine Coast Lightning for 3 years from 2022. And I may have received a gift of 2 tickets from the Sunshine Coast Lightning to attend the Suncorp Super Netball Series quarterfinals in Brisbane on the 12th of August 2018. To comply with the requirements of Section 150 EQ 4C of the Local Government Act 2009, the details of my personal interest in matters associated with agenda item 8.1 are as follows. The person from whom I received the gift was Ms. Danielle Smith, the Chief Executive Officer of the Sunshine Coast Lightning. The nature of my relationship with Ms. Smith and the Sunshine Coast Lightning is that of a professional relationship arising from a long-standing portfolio of councillor responsibilities for sport and economic development on the Sunshine Coast. Ms. Smith and the Sunshine Coast Lightning stand to derive a benefit or may be detrimentally impacted by any decision which Council may make on these matters that are subject to agenda item 8.1. And the value of the 2 tickets which I received to the 12th of August 2018 from the Sunshine Coast Lightning to attend the 2018 Suncorp Super Netball Series quarterfinals is estimated at $400. On that basis, I form the view that I will exclude myself from the meeting while this matter is being considered and the vote is taken.
I understand that you've got a further declaration.
Yes, if you'd like, Mr Chair, I can do item 8.2.
Yes, please.
In which I have a prescribed conflict of interest again. I, Councillor Jason O'Prey, notify that I have a prescribed conflict of interest in item 8.2 to be considered at the ordinary meeting on 29 April 21. Due to the interest, I am an executive board member and life member of Maroochydore Surf Life Saving Club. In item 8.2, Council seeks endorsement to enter into a contract for the sponsorship of 3 Australian Surf Life Saving Championships during the period of 2023 to 2032. In accordance with Section 150EK of the Local Government Act 2009, I will exclude myself from any meeting while this matter is being discussed and the vote is taken.
Thank you for your declarations. I assume you'll now leave the meeting.
Mr Chair, I just have one more thing that I'd like to draw to the Council's attention. It's a responsibility of the Local Government Act and an obligation of a councillor to bring this to the council floor if they feel that there's another conflict of interest on the floor. And I'm not sure whether the councillor has got a notification here this morning or not, but I'd like to draw to the attention that there's a possible conflict of interest in regard to item 8.1, the netball and the sponsorship agreement, potentially with Councillor Natoli, and the matter being that his wife is an employee of the University of the Sunshine Coast, and that the Sunshine Coast University is an owner or co-owner of the Sunshine Coast Lightning. So I might just leave that with you, Mr Chair, to deal with, and I'll just leave the room. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Toley, do you wish to respond to that notification that through your partner you may have a declaration? Sorry, just wait for a second that Jason leaves the room. Please proceed.
Certainly my wife is employed by the university, but has no decision-making process in regards to any decisions that the university makes in regards to the Lightning. Her employment is contract to deliver a particular lecturing program within the university, and therefore I don't see any connection whatsoever in regards to her employment with the university to deal with the Sunshine Coast Lightning.
So Councillor Toley has declared that he doesn't believe he has a declarable conflict of interest, but as it has been raised, the eligible councillors now do have to make a decision whether they agree with that. So would somebody care to consider, you can ask questions beforehand if you wish to, but somebody like to move that he does or doesn't have a declarable conflict of interest? Councillor Suarez.
I will move that Councillor Natoli does not have a conflict of interest. Do I have to look at the reasons, give a reason as well?
To the best of your ability, yes please.
Do we... And I'd like to just flag that I'll reserve my decision making at the end after I've asked some questions of Councillor Natoli.
We don't need to contain the reasons in that resolution, so we can just move that as the council has moved, that he does not have an interest. We don't need to include the reasons in that resolution.
Okay. So I can give you the advice, we don't need to include the reasons if we can just agree that he does not have a declarable conflict of interest.
So now we need a
And that's moved by Councillor Suarez, so seconded Councillor Dixon. Put that to the vote. All those in favour that he does not have a declarable conflict of interest? By all means.
Yes.
The question I'd like to ask before I make my decision is, does someone advise us in relation to this matter? Because, to be honest, I don't have enough information as to whether there is a possible conflict of interest or not. I know that we're supposed to observe an abundance of caution in relation to these matters as an individual councillor, and if there is any possibility, you should perhaps declare a possible conflict of interest. But I really don't have enough information to make a decision at the present moment.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. We'll try to give you advice on the process. I believe that we've observed the process, but let's see if we can get some clarification on the process for you. So I'll ask Megan to give us some explanation on that.
So through the chair, so Councillor Suarez has moved that the councillor does not have a declarable conflict of interest. So I might go to the definition of a declarable conflict of interest in the Act, and then you can take that definition together with the information provided by Councillor Petrie and make a determination. So a councillor has a declarable conflict of interest in a matter if the councillor has or could reasonably be presumed to have a conflict between the councillor's personal interests or the personal interests of a related party of the councillor and the public interest. And because of that conflict, the councillor's participation in a decision about the matter might lead to a decision that is contrary to the public interest.
Does that help? Not a lot. To some extent, I think you have to make a judgment call on the information that you've been given by Councillor Petrie and Councillor Natoli. So are there any other questions? Sorry, Councillor Cox.
It's not a question, Mr. Chair, but I won't be supporting this because it reminds me of an incident where I had a conflict of interest with my wife's employment at a very similar situation in a teaching role, and I was actually referred to the Office of Independent Assessor. So I would be suggesting that you do have a declarable interest, but I would be then supportive of you staying in the room.
Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Councillor Natoli, this has come as a surprise, I think, to the majority of councillors in the room. And like Councillor Johnston, we have very little information to go on. So I'd just like to ask a few questions so that we've got some better understanding as to whether the conflict actually exists or not. From the little that we've had, my gut feeling is that you do not have a declarable conflict of interest because the relationship is so far apart. So my question to you is, with your wife's employment at the University of the Sunshine Coast, can you please explain the nature of her contract with the University of the Sunshine Coast, what she's contracted to do at the university? And would you also advise us if your wife has had any relationship with the Sunshine Coast Lightning team, its formation, its promotion, anything like that? Thank you.
Councillor Natoli.
My wife has been employed at the university for over 20 years on an annual contractual base to deliver a industry-based media and journalism course at the university. Her job, obviously working with Channel 7, has enabled her to have a half-time lecturer's position and has held that position for 20 years. My wife is obviously purely focused on that role. Any decision making, she relies on her contract obviously being rolled over a year, so there is no permanency in that relationship with the university. She's purely to deliver one particular facet of the education program that the university has. In saying that, her only involvement that I know with the Lightning is that she did come with me to an opening to when they launched the Lightning. That's the only time that she's ever been to a Lightning match. She's not necessarily a major sporting fan, but that's the only thing. Last year I had many opportunities to take up tickets that have been offered, and I chose not to do so purely because I couldn't take my wife and myself, and I chose, in fact I tried to offer them to my PA, but I wasn't allowed to do that, so yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Natoli. Councillor Suarez, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Thank you for that explanation, Joe. I feel comfortable with the recommendation that I've made, but just to give further clarity, with my understanding of what's in the Local Government Act, would there be any situation based on the decision that's being made today where yourself or your wife will receive any benefit or negative impact from the decision of today's agenda item?
Councillor Tully.
Definitely no, but I am aware that there was an email sent yesterday that offered councillors opportunities for 2 tickets. Obviously, those 2 tickets would be for myself and possibly my wife. So, you know, that is going to be an issue for all of us councillors when we make these decisions, and whether we make those decisions today, whether we accept them or not. As I said, I had that opportunity last year to go to a number of games. I chose not to, purely because I don't believe it's my role as a councillor to take advantage of those sorts of offerings that are made. I'd rather see our staff take advantage of those and we give it to other people in the organisation.
Thank you for your reply. Councillor Law.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for your answering the questions for us, Councillor Joe. When I just think about how this has come together, we're required to report through that not only our own personal connections to other organisations and what we do, but also that of our whole family, who does my wife work for, and so on and so on. And I think for maintaining the robustness and the integrity of the council, I think I have to agree with Councillor Cox that there is a declarable conflict of interest here, because, and I think you've explained that there isn't going to be an issue, but there is a declarable conflict, so I can't support the motion. I'll have to vote against this, that there is a declarable conflict, but I would subsequently vote that you can stay in the room and participate, because I don't think it will inhibit your ability to make a decision that will be in the best interest of the whole of the Sunshine Coast region. And I think your answers have demonstrated that, but I can't support the motion as it is because there is a declarable conflict in my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Any other questions or comments? We do have, sorry, Councillor Suarez.
I'd just like to respond to that. I mean, this is a difficult situation for all councillors here, and Peter Cox's experience in the past also demonstrates that the university, the hospital, they are major employers here on the Sunshine Coast. So, I mean, how far do we have to extend this declarable conflict of interest just because you work at a very, very large organisation where you're lost in the system and you have absolutely nothing to do with the agenda item, that you have to then declare that you've got a conflict simply by a matter of employment that's far removed from the item. I'm just finding this really difficult to resolve, and I will still stick with my motion and support that you don't have a conflict, and I think it would be maybe worth us going down this track for future items so that we've got better clarification and don't have to make these decisions on the spot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. I presume the CEO will make note that we might need some additional support in this area, but councillors, we do have Councillor Hungerford.
I'll just add my perception on this. I believe it is declarable because there is the perceived conflict, or a person or persons could perceive there's a conflict. I don't believe there is, in that from the explanations given here, but for good governance and transparency, I think it's good that it's declared, fully aired, and then we'll have one. But I also agree, I'll agree it is a declarable because there's a perception there, but when it comes to the subsequent vote and staying in the room, I believe Councillor Natali can stay in the room, so I don't believe there is an actual conflict.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, I'll put Councillor Suarez's motion to the vote that the Councillor Natali does not have a declarable conflict of interest. All those in favour? So Councillor Johnston, Councillor Suarez, Councillor Babarowski. Those against? Councillor Landsberg, Councillor Cox, Councillor Dixon, Councillor Hungerford, Councillor Law. Motion is lost. So I presume somebody would now like to move that the Councillor Natali does have a conflict of interest. Councillor Cox. Can I look for a seconder? Councillor Law. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Natali?
To be honest, I'm happy just to walk out of this room and not even deal with this issue because, you know, the fact is that the university may own part of the Lightning, but I look at the Lightning as a completely separate body to the university. There's a shareholding. Yes, I can now understand. You can draw that conclusion, but just for the sake of, you know, allowing everybody to sort of take a cold shower, I'm happy to walk out and let you make that decision without me being here, and I'm more than happy to do that, Mr. Deputy Mayor, so that, you know, this issue just goes away.
Thank you for letting us know. I think we still have a motion on the table, so we will need to take a vote on it, but we're now taking that vote with the notice that the knowledge that you're intending to leave the meeting. So any other questions or comments? Councillor Cox.
I just wanted to say that, through you, Mr. Chair, that whilst I have moved this, I would be supporting the follow-up that Councillor Untitled does stay in the room for the 8.1 item to be voted. So that would be my subsequent.
I think Councillor Untitled has indicated there doesn't need to be a follow-up. He's intending to leave the room on his decision.
That's where I was. No, Councillor Law.
Understood. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Law.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. Just want to emphasise to you, Councillor Natoli, that I'm comfortable that you are able to make the right decision here. It's about having the correct and really clear and transparent process, that there is a perception that we need to declare, or you need to declare that there is a conflict here. However, I don't think it will impact your decision-making ability. Obviously your choice, but it's about getting the process right so that we know that if we can get the little stuff right, when it comes to the big things, we know we're getting that right too. So obviously your choice, but I would be supporting that you remain with us for this decision.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Any other questions or comments? No. In that case, we'll put Councillor Cox's motion to the vote that Councillor Natoli does have a declarable conflict of interest in agenda item 8.1. Those in favour? Councillor Landsberg, Councillor Cox, Councillor Dixon, Councillor Hungerford, Councillor Law. Those opposed? Councillor Babarowski, Councillor Suarez and Councillor Johnston. It's carried. Councillor Natoli, am I to assume that you're choosing to leave the room on this item? So thank you very much, Councillor Natoli. Just give me a minute to exit. Thank you, councillors. So we now have to consider, unless there are other deferrals. Lovely. So we'll now go to the presentation on 8.1, which is by Bryn Skilbeck. Thank you very much, Bryn. Over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and councillors. So the proposal to be considered in this agenda item is the continuation of Council's sponsorship of the Sunshine Coast Lightning beyond the existing deal, which expires at the end of the current season, which many of you will be aware starts next week. The Lightning played their first game in the 2021 season, so our current contract with the organisation expires at the end of the 2021 season, so we are discussing the potential to extend that into next year. Just as some brief history, I'm sure councillors are aware that council played a key role back in 2016 in the formation of the Sunshine Coast Lightning, along with the University of the Sunshine Coast and the Melbourne Storm, who are owners and co-funders of the Lightning. Council entered originally into a 3-year funding deal commencing in the 2017 season to provide a sponsorship, initially in terms of the creation of the Sunshine Coast Lightning, to form that team and to get them operational. Subsequently, Council then considered an extension to that in 2019, so that initial contract was extended for a further 2 years, as I noted, through to 2021. We have received, as Council, a bid from the Lightning for an extension of this deal for a further 3 years beyond this season. In terms of the partnership history, it is certainly the opinion of our team within economic development that the Lightning has done a fantastic job in being a startup team within our region and the outcomes that they have provided for us as a region and as a council. It's notable that they are often referred to as the most successful national startup team in Australian history, and it was quite remarkable to note their on-court success. Winning the grand final in their first 2 years was an outstanding physical achievement for the team, but they've remained highly competitive on the field right through and represented the Sunshine Coast very strongly in their play in each of the tournaments. Of equal importance is that they have, we believe, exceeded the requirements of our contract with them over the past 5 years in terms of the delivery that they have been able to offer to the region in the areas of local support, in the areas of marketing of the region to their broad audience right around Australia and internationally. We note things like every Lightning home game has been a sellout since their inception in 2017. So that shows us an exceptional local support for the team, a very passionate local support from netball fans, and the region in general are very proud of us being the host and a key partner of the Sunshine Coast Lightning. Other key points to note is that they're a highly successful marketing agency. They have an enormous reach around Australia through their digital marketing, that through these contracts we have access to promote the region as a tourism destination, but we also have the flexibility to promote anything that council wishes to what is very large audiences. And we note that Suncorp Super Netball has really increased its audience over the last 4 to 5 years since its inception, running exceptionally well. It's the 4th most watched sport in Australia, behind only the very high profile men's sports such as AFL and NRL. We also note that the vast majority of the audience for Lightning activity is actually outside of the region, so it gives us a very strong opportunity to use the Lightning's reach to their membership and their fans and netball fans in general to tell the stories of the Sunshine Coast. In terms of the future partnership, we have commenced discussions with the Lightning, obviously pending council approval, in terms of what we would see a focus would be in the coming year. Definitely a continued focus on the national exposure that we are able to achieve through the Lightning's reach, but being clear that we're very open to discussions through council about exactly the messages we are trying to promote. And we will have, if we go ahead with this agreement, we will have a full 3 years to be able to work with a wide variety of council teams to promote their messaging both locally and nationally. We've got a very big focus on industry and community support, which the Lightning has provided very strong input into over the last few years, and we want that to continue in the sense of helping us build local industry, in the sense of making benefits for local businesses who are associated with the Lightning or use the Lightning as a tool to promote their own products, but also in the accessibility to the stars, the players, who have been very open and very generous in their time in everything from local community and school activities through to assisting us in business briefings and other events where we're trying to achieve a key council outcome. And then finally, their connection to the local community. The Lightning are very proud to be part of the Sunshine Coast, and I believe the Sunshine Coast is very proud to have the Lightning, and that is an important part of what goes forward with this team. So in summary, it's the opinion of council officers that the Lightning has done an excellent job in delivering what we have requested of them in their initial 5 years, and that should council continue in the deal, we have an opportunity to evolve that again as the Lightning grows and becomes an even stronger team on and off the field. We have the ability to continue to look at how we gain the maximum benefit from our association with the team. So in summary, the officer recommendation in relation to this report is that council obviously note the paper that has been provided, and then through the CEO instructs us to continue with negotiation of this potential sponsorship from 2022 for the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Skilbeck. Someone to move.
session. I've just got a question I want to ask.
We,
Yeah, so we need to do that. So are you moving that we go on?
Yeah, I'll move again.
Yeah, yeah.
I've just got a question I want to ask.
fair enough. Okay, so Councillor Hank would like to move that we go into confidential session. Somebody second. Councillor Landsberg, all those in favour? Thank you very much. We'll just give us a moment to pause the recording. Back in open session, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. So, I'll go for somebody to move the item. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said, are you going to give an explanation as to why we were in committee?
Why we went into confidential? I think it was pretty obvious that there's a confidential session in this item, section in this item. The councillor had a question that related to that confidential section. We've now resolved that inquiry, so we're back into open. So thank you, Councillor Johnson. That may help people watching.
Yep.
Not at all. So someone to move the officer recommendation. Councillor Landsberg is seconder. Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Landsberg, would you like to open?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Bryn, for that presentation. Totally in support of the officer's recommendation. Just a question for you. The impact to the other businesses that have been involved with this journey, supporting the Lightning. Did you just want to feed on some of the improvements that's helped in terms of, probably don't have to name the businesses, but there's probably one in mind that I have that has been extremely popular, not only in Queensland, but interstate throughout New South Wales and Victoria as well.
Yeah, certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess we would look at that from the perspective of there are a wide number of small businesses that are involved in the hosting of the events themselves and are performing that work, but there's also larger council businesses who have entered into their own deal with the Lightning, not through council, but directly to the team to be able to promote their product, which has given a number of them very significant growth into places in Melbourne and Sydney that they wouldn't have been able to achieve without advertising through the Lightning. So whilst council's not directly involved in those deals and doesn't provide the funding for them, we're certainly highly supportive of making those connections between local business and the reach and advertising potential that they have to talk to a wider audience through an association with the Lightning.
Thank you, Bryn. Yeah, definitely a homegrown success story. And, with the numbers that you've just spoken about, the 39 games since we've played on the coast since its inception, obviously the outside marketing that we're over 60% of the marketing is external outside the state. The huge growth in women's sport that we've been seeing, I think it's a wonderful contribution that we're making to continue to support the Lightning. Also, fourth rater behind our other sports with cricket, rugby league as well. I think, and what I'm really impressed with is the amount of time that the players take out of their own personal time, over 1,200 hours of the players' time to visit local events, over 320 local events to support our local economy. So, yeah, definitely in favour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Just following on from Councillor Landsberg's final comment, I'd also like to reiterate I'm really impressed with the Sunshine Coast Lightning's commitment to the local community. They're partnering with charities such as the Compass Institute and how's this for a great charity named the Confident Girls Foundation. Their community appearances, they also have their own award internally where they have their Community Champion Award, and if anyone's going to be competitive, it's athletes. So I think that's really great that they compete amongst themselves as to how much good they can do in the community. Their game day connections and work with the netball associations our experience is that money can't buy, and it's hard to put a value on that. And that leads to my question that I have for you today, which is we have some desired outcomes from this sponsorship, but we don't have any outline of how these outcomes would be measurable. And while I see the inherent value of this sponsorship, I think it's responsible for this council to also have some measurables to make sure that our outcomes are being achieved. So can you please, sorry, the question is, do we have any measurements to achieve those desired outcomes?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I think absolutely we agree that that's of high importance, and given that the relationship to date has been based on the original contract, which was done 5 years ago at their formation, going forward into a new contract gives us the ability to put a lot more of that detail in of exactly what we're looking for and how it would be measured. But for example, we have worked through a lot more detail with them about what the marketing looks like, what access we have to those things, what happens when they play an away game in Melbourne and how we can be represented within that. We also have a list of outcomes for our community organisations, so things like we've talked about player appearances and their support for local teams and local training and industry development. So our ability to put into the contract a lot more detail that's in the existing one is definitely the intention, and the discussions to date with the Lightning is that they're highly supportive of all of that. And like we noted earlier, we believe to a certain extent they've over-delivered on the contract in the first 5 years. We have the chance to keep talking to them in the next 3 years about how we continue to improve that.
Happy with that? Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillors, I will be supporting this motion in front of us here today. And having been a councillor that was in governance at the time when staff came to us with the proposition of forming a new SunCentral netball team for Queensland, there was great enthusiasm within the Sunshine Coast. And whilst many of those staff members have now moved on, they did play an integral role in helping to secure the Lightning here. And for me, that's really noticeable in our community pride. As Bryn has already touched on, the most successful startup national team in Australian history. That is, I think, speaks wonders of the achievement of the team, but there's been a lot of people behind the scenes that have brought this together. So I'm quite proud of the council's decision back in 2016 to help facilitate this, and I'll certainly be supporting the further extension for 3 years through this sponsorship agreement.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Law.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question around the risk for the Lightning if we do not continue with this sponsorship, and I do have a follow-up question.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. So the Lightning is a relatively stable organisation, so they are certainly looking to continue the deal with us in terms of the income that provides and the things that they are able to do as a business. I guess one thing that we would be clear on is that we don't see this as a grant, we see this as a sponsorship for council. So it is not providing money to enable the organisation to exist, it is providing money to enable them to continue to increase and deliver results back to council in everything from the community through to our wider reach. So there is a position of council deciding what an appropriate investment is, but that is very much based on the outcomes achieved by our partnership with the organisation rather than what the organisation requires to survive. It's not in that space.
Follow-up question.
Thank you for that, and I would just want to reflect the comments from Councillor Maria around really sharpening up the KPIs and the measurables around that so that we can really see the benefits that are being received from the sponsorship, not only for Lightning but for the Sunshine Coast community. The follow-up question is, what work do we envisage will happen to help the Lightning not require our sponsorship to ensure their ongoing ability to deliver netball on the Sunshine Coast at this national level and national visibility for the benefits that the coast people gain from that?
I guess the council supports the Lightning in a number of ways. We noted earlier that we have assisted in partnering them up with other local businesses that now invest for their own outcomes within the Lightning. So that's a great outcome in terms of growing the Lightning business, but also the local businesses who are making their own choice to be involved. I think moving forward for council, what we would be looking to do in the new deal is, again, it's to increase the benefits that we receive from being part of that team. So should we move forward in this stage, we've talked about the sorts of things we would put into this contract. There may be another discussion at the end of the 3-year period about how successful that's been, and we definitely acknowledge those comments about needing to be tighter about what's in the deal and how we track that in the background. So I think that would be a continuing discussion with council beyond the end of this stage to again assess, are we getting the returns that justify the investment that we're making in the sponsorship and support of the team.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. There doesn't appear to be any other questions or comments. Councillor Landsberg, do you wish to close?
Thank you, through the Chair. No, thank you, Bryn, and excellent questions, Councillor Maria and Councillor David. Especially in our current economic climate, we are looking for the best bang for buck for our ratepayers. And I acknowledge Councillor Ted there that things are tight in the budget this year, but I think this is basically a no-brainer. We really need it. It's a great opportunity to continue with the Lightning, and I'm sure we'll reap huge benefits over this coming few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Langberg. Thank you for stopping short of going for the chant, go Lightning, go. I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Thank you. And can I just say again, thank you for the quality of the presentations over the years. And Greg, as the GE, really fantastic job on this. We really appreciate the standard of reporting and the management of this sponsorship. Well done. Okay.
You get me from now.
Yep. So would someone like to just ask Councillor Toley to rejoin? Thank you. We then move on to item 8.2. Welcome back, Councillor Toley. We're now considering item 8.2, the major event sponsorship of Australian Surf Lifesaving Championships, and we have a presentation again by Bryn Skilbeck. So over to you, Bryn. Oh, sorry, we've already accepted, by the way, just to take note, that Councillor Prey remains as a declared conflict of interest on this item. I presume there's no other declarables, so over to you, Bryn.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So the second item for us to present today relates to the future investment in the Australian Surf Lifesaving Championships, known widely as the Aussies. Councillors will of course be aware that the 2021 hosting of the Aussies has only recently concluded last weekend, and whilst we're still in the stage of getting together the full data around the number of people and the impact on local businesses, etc., it was certainly a very exciting week on the Sunshine Coast, which many of you will have observed in fabulous weather and excellent conditions for the competition. We had over 6,000 athletes, the vast majority from interstate, visiting us for 8 or 9 days as an average stay with family and friends and having a fantastic time in the competition. So we will have some further data to provide to Council about the outcome from the 2021 event, but certainly the discussions that have taken place to date is that Surf Lifesaving should be congratulated on running an excellent and safe event, in attracting a very high number of participants, and in putting on something that the local industry and the visitors really enjoyed across the week. Just in terms of some quick history of our hosting of the Aussies, Council entered into a sponsorship agreement with Surf Lifesaving Australia back in 2016 to host the event for the first time in its modern form. The 2016 event was a great success. In that year, there was over 7,000 participants. and a measured economic value in terms of direct spend by the visitors during their time on the Sunshine Coast of in excess of $20 million. So a very significant contribution to a very wide range of businesses whilst the event was in town. As I just noted, one of the things that we thought was very encouraging and looking forward, one of the strengths of the Aussies event is its stability in terms of numbers. Council will be aware that some events have rising and falling numbers over the years as things come in and out of trend. Certainly Surf Lifesaving Australia over the last 5 or 6 years has maintained that very high demand and a very similar entrant number from 2016 on the Sunshine Coast through to hosting in other regions and then again back to us in 2021, despite some of the challenges they faced about border closures and I guess perception of international travel during the time that athletes were planning to join us. So Council has previously had 2 individual deals with Surf Lifesaving Australia, the first being for 2016 and the second being a separate deal that was approved to host the event in 2021. In terms of the history of those deals, Council did invest significant financial resources into what is a very large and very complicated event to run. And also the Council teams, again, as you would note over the last week, did a fantastic job in preparing the area, in assisting in operating the event safely, and in making sure that all things around transport and things that were required for all of the athletes were in place. Tourism and Events Queensland, through state government funding, have been long-term partners in this event, sponsoring it over the last 20 years in a range of locations, including the 2 hostings of the event that have occurred on the Sunshine Coast, heavily backed and done as a partnership with Tourism and Events Queensland, and certainly the intent of this proposal is to continue and in fact strengthen that relationship both in this event but in a range of other events that we work very closely with them on determining the best events for us to support to create great outcomes for the region and the state. In terms of the future opportunity, discussions commenced quite some time ago about what would happen with the hosting of the Aussies event beyond 2024. Beyond 2022. So there's a current location locked in for the event in 2022, but beyond that it is yet to be confirmed. The intention of joining a partnership with TEQ was to look at securing a long-term deal over 10 years that locks the event in for a certain number of appearances in Queensland and then as a result a number of appearances on the Sunshine Coast. The reasons that we looked at this deal as being a strong one for Council and in fact the whole of the state is that locking the event in over a long term and being able to confirm the dates and times of which it will occur in different regions gives us a far greater amount of time to plan effectively for the works, for the lead up and in fact maximising our returns and the benefits that we receive from being part of the event. It really further aligns us with Tourism Events Queensland joining this deal and also gives some real certainty to the surf lifesaving community about where this event will be held, noting how popular it was to be on the Sunshine Coast. So the proposed deal is for Council to consider entering into jointly with Tourism Events Queensland would see a contract signed for the 10-year future of Surf Lifesaving Australia between 2023 and 2032, with 8 of those 10 years to be held in Queensland and 3 of those 8 years to be held on the Sunshine Coast. So effectively that would see the Sunshine Coast hosting this event on a significantly more regular basis than historically we have been able to do. Every 3 years, notionally with the first year being 2024, which is of particular importance to the Sunshine Coast given that a number of our major surf lifesaving clubs such as Alexander Headlands are celebrating their 100th anniversary that year, and this gives them a great part of their celebrations to have so many guests in place at that time. So therefore, the officer recommendation is again that council receive the report that includes the background information on the previous deals and how this one would move forward, and then authorise through the CEO our ability to continue in the negotiations for this 10-year deal to attempt to lock in the event 3 times in the next 10 years. For council in what we believe is a very strong deal for all parties, including the investment required by us and the benefits we can generate from what is one of Australia's most established and largest events. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Skilbeck. Someone to move the officer recommendation. Councillor Natoli, seconded. Councillor Landsberg. Councillor Natoli, would you like to open?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The Aussies obviously were a major event that we had here over the last couple of weeks. Saw it being built in terms of an event platform, and then the amount of people that were here. In fact, I was fortunate enough on Sunday to be invited to the Golden Blades Awards that was actually held at the Maroochydore Bowls Club. 650 people that stayed back, massive numbers of people from interstate. Those number of people stayed for an extra 2 nights. The Maroochydore Bowls Club managed to turn their bowls club into an event, and it now gives us the opportunity to look at having future events that can hold 650 plus people. That extra additional income to the bowls club and to the local community was acknowledged by the president of the Maroochydore Bowls Club. He had a smile as wide as possible. And if that smile sort of translates to all the other businesses, definitely around Maroochydore and Alex, I saw very hectic around there. Maybe it didn't translate as much into Maroochydore and Cafe Precinct as much, but I think in the past, I've made mention about how we can learn on how to better leverage with the database that these organisations have. So maybe there's opportunities that we can continue to promote our region 365 days a year through some arrangement that we have, whether it's the Ironman, whether it's the triathlon, whether it's the Aussies or whatever. I think we can do more, and I think our businesses and tourism can benefit broadly from that. There's no doubt, listening to people on Sunday, the reputation of the Sunshine Coast is just incredible. So they're taking away images, they're taking away experiences. They will talk about what happened, and sort of made me feel like you wish that we were still young and able to compete and be out there. The amount of fun that they had was just great to see. So, but we are, whether we like it or not, a major tourism destination. We heard yesterday how events are really where we need to concentrate and look at how we can promote our region and bring that economic development to our region. The benefits from that, I think, are long term. So I believe that we as a council should be doing what we can to make sure that we can take advantage, especially we have a very strong surfing community. We have very strong clubs, long history, over 100 years now. I think Maroochydore next year celebrates 100 years. Alex celebrate 100 years. It's a long tradition, a long history, and our association with the Aussies should be a very easy connection to make.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you again, Bryn. My line of questioning is similar to the previous item. In the report, we talk about some of the evidence that we've got from our historical association with this event, being the economic benefits, the promotional value, and Sunshine Coast Council's reputation and ability to hold such events here in our region. The proposal here doesn't really hit what desired outcomes we want from the sponsorship or how we would measure those outcomes. So I'd just like to ask the same question as last time. Through the negotiations, will those outcomes and measurables be clearly defined so that we can see the value for our sponsorship going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Through you, Deputy Mayor, another excellent question. So these are discussions that have been part of the ongoing negotiation behind this opportunity from the beginning. Certainly the contract will include the expectations around visitation and direct economic impact, and we would expect that that will remain relatively sturdy over the coming years. But definitely we are looking to expand that in a number of ways. So within the contract this time, we're already commenced discussions around the marketing opportunities to, whilst we had 6,000 surf lifesavers in the region for the event, there are tens of thousands of other surf lifesavers around Australia who, for one reason or another, didn't participate this year. So we want to be able to talk to them about other opportunities to come to the region and other reasons to associate with the Sunshine Coast. Another key outcome we're looking for if we go ahead with this through our partnership with Tourism Events Queensland and Surf Lifesaving is other events in this space. So in the on-water space, there are state surf lifesaving championships, there are junior events, there are other things that are obviously done at a much smaller investment and a smaller events, but we can continue to run in this space given our very strong reputation as a region that hosts these on-water events so well. So there will definitely be a focus in the future deal about how we define what we're looking for there, both in terms of the economic outputs, but also in terms of what this does for the reputation of the region. And I guess one of the things that we look at is that the region is doing very well as a big picture in terms of tourism and in terms of visitation. And whilst there's lots of factors within that, we think the strength of demonstrating the events we've been able to host and the coverage that those events receive of participants and visitors having a great time in a beautiful location creates longer term benefits in all of those areas. So it is about how do we track that as best we can and maximise those outcomes.
Take it that was a question you didn't speak to the motion yet? Fair enough. Okay, so Councillor Cox.
Thanks. Firstly, just a question through to the CEO, just in terms of item B, negotiate and execute the contract. Just looking at how long you envisage that particular process to take.
I don't have an exact time frame for that, but I understand that it's imminent. I understand there's a lot of work that's been done already with all the parties. And I was myself an attendee on Saturday at the finals of the Aussies and had the great fortune of meeting with the president of Surf Lifesaving, who reiterated their great commitment to running the Aussies across Queensland. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be wrapping up those negotiations in a shorter time frame rather than a longer one.
Great, that's good news. Just quickly, I'll speak to this just in terms of my support. I, on Tuesday, received an email from one of my constituents, Division 3. She was actually a volunteer at the Aussies over the surf boat racing. She's one of the judges, I'm led to believe. And she wrote to me just sort of saying how wonderful this event was for the Sunshine Coast, the exposure that it gets. Obviously fits in with our healthy, smart and creative aspirations in the Sunshine Coast to have all these aspiring sort of surf lifesavers. And yeah, so it was really incredible. She's in a demographic which I would say would be in that sort of over 70s demographic, and she still can see the economic benefits, the community sentiment. So it's really encouraging to receive emails like that. And I also just wanted to mention that my young neighbour, 16-year-old next door, she achieved a gold medal and a silver medal at the Aussies. So in speaking with her father, it's really incredible when the athletes get to stay at home, sleep in their own bed, eat food, eat at home. They also have the ability to really achieve, rather than going elsewhere interstate or to the Gold Coast. It really gives our local athletes a huge leg up, plus all of that economic benefit that we've heard from the visitation that they bring into our economy. So definitely we'll be supporting this here today.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Without wanting to embarrass our CEO. Is it true that you participate in some of the events?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That is a bit embarrassing. Yes, I embarrassingly swam a very slow 2K swim at the Aussies, but what I was delighted at was that they opened the event to everyone you didn't have to be a club member to swim in it. And I thought that was a great opportunity for people, ordinary people like myself on the coast, to participate in what just had a great vibe to it. So yes, I did participate in the Aussies, and I got myself a participation medal to show for it too.
Thank you. I'd just like everybody to, particularly those viewing and the media who may not have realised that, to realise just what a fit and and willing CEO that we have. And thank you for participating. The other reason I wanted to speak is that on Sunday, during the Anzac ceremony at Maleny, on the main ceremony in mid-morning, as my role as a member of the Maleny Blackall Range Lions Club, I was selling for the RSL badges and various other paraphernalia to the public who were lining the streets. And during the process, I got talking to a number of people, and I was delighted to meet two couples that had actually come to the Sunshine Coast purely to attend the Aussies. So that just goes to show that there's not just the coast that benefits from these things, but the hinterland does too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Any other speakers? No? Would you like to close, Councillor Toley?
No. I think for me, this is really an important aspect of what Council does. We're out there trying to make sure that we can have many different facets of our economy that benefit our locals, benefit the visitors that come here. And interesting enough that Councillor Johnson mentioned about Anzac Day, the Kawana dawn service was huge, and there were a lot of visiting competitors from the Aussies that actually came to that service, and it was just great to see that they participated in our local community as well. So, councillors, I would hope that you would see the benefit of this and vote for it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toley. Put the officer recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. Once again, congratulations to the GE and the team and the officers involved. Very good management of this sponsorship over the years. Thanks again. We'll move on to item 8.3, which is community groups occupying council-owned or council-controlled land or infrastructure policy. And we have a presentation. We do have a number of notifications of perceived conflicts of interest. So as you're on your feet.
We need to vote by choice.
My apologies. We'll look for Councillor Prey to come back in. To acknowledge and thank Councillor Prey for returning, and we'll now go on to the declarations. So, as you're on your feet, Councillor Johnston, your declaration.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I, Councillor Winston Johnston, notify that I have a prescribed conflict of interest in item 8.3, community groups occupying council-owned or council-controlled land and or infrastructure policy to be considered at today's meeting, at the ordinary meeting today, 29th of April 2021. I am a member and also the president of the Maleny Show Society Incorporated. The Maleny Show Society has a management agreement with Council for the management of the Maleny Showgrounds. I'd also like to let everybody know that this matter, which is on the agenda, relates to some hundreds of different leases and management agreements, not just the Maleny Show. In accordance with Section 150 EK of the Local Government Act 2009, I'll exclude myself from the meeting while this matter is being discussed and the vote is taken.
Thank you for your declaration, Councillor Johnston. Councillor Landsberg.
Through the Chair, I, Councillor Terry Landsberg, notify that I have a prescribed conflict of interest in item 8.3, community groups occupying council-owned or council-controlled land and or infrastructure policy, to be considered at the ordinary meeting on the 29th of April 2021, as I am a member and also the president of the Wyndham Sea Board Riders Club. The Wyndham Sea Board Riders Club pays permit fees to Sunshine Coast Council for the use of the inside storage area of the public amenities block at Graham Stewart Park at Ilya Street, Curramundi. In accordance with section 150EK of the Local Government Act 2009, I will exclude myself from any meeting while this matter is being discussed and the vote is taken.
Thank you very much, Councillor Landsberg. Councillor O'Prey.
Chair, I, Councillor Jason O'Prey, notify that I may have a prescribed conflict of interest in agenda item 8.3 to be considered at the ordinary meeting on 29 April 21 on the basis that I am an executive board member and life member of Maroochydore Surf Lifesaving Club. In addition, I have a long-standing association with Surf Lifesaving and Surf Lifesaving clubs across the Sunshine Coast, which is a relationship which on its own may ordinarily constitute a declarable conflict of interest. My roles with the Maroochydore Surf Lifesaving Club are identified in my published register of interests. The Maroochydore Surf Lifesaving Club and other surf lifesaving clubs on the Sunshine Coast could benefit from or be disadvantaged by the decision which Council may make on the matters outlined in agenda item 8.3 to be considered at the ordinary meeting on 29 April 21, given a number of surf lifesaving clubs occupy council land or land under the control of council as the trustee. Accordingly, in accordance with section 15EK of the Local Government Act 2009, I will exclude myself from participating in the making of the decision in the matter and leave the chamber while the matter is being discussed and the vote is taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your declaration, Councillor O'Prey. Any other declarations? No. Just wait for a second. So, Councillors, we're back to considering 8.3 in the presentation by Officer Andrew Tout. Over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillors, the report today recommends amendments to the strategic policy, community groups occupying council-owned or controlled land or infrastructure, commonly and generally known as the community leasing policy. It administers approximately 250 community organisations, sporting, recreation and community groups occupying council-owned or controlled infrastructure. The original policy was established in 2014 and it discharged all cost responsibilities to those tenure holders, including maintenance, operating costs, utilities, insurance, and feedback has been generally received over that time. Those community organisations find that administration onerous and financially challenging. So the proposal is to amend that strategic policy to ease some of those burdens. It aligns with the Community Strategy 2019 and the Environmental Liveability Strategy by providing accessible, adaptable and equitable facilities, provides additional financial support to those organisations and is aimed at improving that interaction and process for those community groups and ultimately maintain council assets at an appropriate standard level and to generate the cost effectiveness of that asset management life cycle process. So there are 243 community organisations who will be impacted by this change in policy and those tenure arrangements range from leases to licences to state permits. At this stage the policy indicates that all improvements on council-owned or controlled land on construction or installation become the property of council. That is the current policy and there's no proposal to change that at this stage. It involves approximately 500 buildings across the region. In terms of comparison to other councils, Sunshine Coast provide more or greater than the average new sporting facilities, the widest range of support to community groups, and contributes and supports through the Community Grant Fund. However, it's the lowest contributor to operational costs and maintenance and upkeep of those facilities. So the key policy amendments are that all high-cost structural maintenance and the cost responsibility in delivery for those activities is transferred to council. The backlog maintenance to bring those facilities up to a minimum standard transfers to the cost responsibility of council, together with the future life cycle replacement and maintenance of those facilities, including refurbishment, and then in heritage conservation, a more shared cost and delivery responsibility. So they're the key cost elements. For those organisations, those community organisations that occupy buildings that are not owned or controlled by council, or are in facilities where council has no interest in the land, those organisations still have access to the community grant funds, although this policy will not apply to them. So they still have support through council, but not direct delivery report. Other areas of cost challenges to those organisations are utility charges, particularly around access charges, the fixed costs for water, access and sewerage. The proposal is that those costs transfer to council and the organisations are relieved of approximately 50% of that utility cost. They will still be responsible for volume of utilities. And the council will insure the buildings that it owns and controls and is recognised as the owner, and that includes flood insurance. There are proposed amendments to the fees and charges, and I'll come to that later in the presentation. And it retains the same unit of rental basis of the original policy. So the cost impact at full implementation is $2.3 million per annum. It's proposed as this will be a 3-year implementation, so 1/3 of that portfolio each year for 3 years, at which point the recurrent cost to council will be $2.3 million. The community organisations who have that tenure will continue to have some responsibilities for those facilities: general upkeep, low-cost maintenance, reactive maintenance, cleaning gutters, repairing light fittings and windows. We estimate that's approximately $1 million a year still, so they still have some cost obligations, but far less than they will currently. So the benefits, principally the community organisations get to focus their time on programming and their core business rather than maintenance of council facilities, supporting that long-term financial sustainability of those organisations who are on an ongoing basis reporting back that they are financially unsustainable with these obligations, and that the standard of the portfolio is generally lifted across the entire region, regardless of the location or use or purpose of that building. And a key one is that it ensures the statutory maintenance of those buildings is maintained, and that will be a cost responsibility and delivery by council. In terms of fees and charges, the amendments are that the single unit of rent, it's proposed that will increase from $265 per year to $904. The reason for that is to recoup the cost of administering these new policy arrangements, but they only occur on transition. So when the organisation accrues those maintenance benefits, at that point the unit of rate charge will increase. So a significant benefit to those community groups, even though there is some offset of cost. The other proposal is that 50% of any commercial lease that's entered into in those owned and controlled buildings would be remitted to council. There are very few of those, but the proposal is that 50% of that income, of that revenue from the sublease, would be remitted to council. So the recommendation is the report is received and noted, and that the policy is adopted and implemented in a staged manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Telt. Did you want to move the item? Okay. So you're moving the item, the officer recommendation. Councillor Ntoli, a seconder. Councillor Law. Would you care to open, Councillor Ntoli?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor and Andrew. Fantastic work that you and your team have done. I was flabbergasted when I first was made aware of the 2014 policy. And obviously for 9 years, our organisations, community organisations that I see as the very fabric of our community and our existence here on the coast, is that we have so many wonderful community groups that do amazing work, and their focus is always on the well-being of their organisation, the people that they serve, and the broader community. And to think that that focus has had to shift to survival and the burden of having to maintain and upkeep and major structural works, and I had first-hand experience with Andrew with an organisation that was just about ready to walk out of their lease, because it's got to a point where either over the 9 years we've seen our assets not being able to be maintained at the standard that we would maintain them because of the inability of those organisations to be able to fund, and obviously at the same time being torn by the work that they want to do versus their obligations to maintain the building. And so they've lost their focus, and it's created a lot of stress, a lot of worries, and I think for us as a community, we want to see our community organisations focus solely on what they were created to do. And this is just, I think, a great opportunity for us to do that, to go back and say, you know, we want you to continue the great work that you do. We want to take that pressure off you. We want to bring our assets over the 3 years back to a standard that that we would expect. And so I would hope that councillors, that this to me is just an obvious decision that we should be making, supporting our community, and we'll get amazing dividends from this, given the opportunity to focus on the work that they do, and we will focus on making sure that the assets and infrastructure that house them is well maintained, and therefore many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Andrew, for the work that you've done. As Councillor Natoli mentioned, there were some pressures for the community groups, and it's really appreciated by them that you've done the work to bring this policy in line. I'd also like to say thank you for the additional information that you prepared in a fairly short time. I know we had the long weekend. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole last night, stayed up quite late looking at all those figures. There is one area that I'm still a little uncertain about, and that's to do with what we classify as ownership of the structures. So this policy is clearly going to benefit those community groups who are on council land whose building is now classified as council ownership asset rather than their own. I might just refer to page 35 of the agenda, which is the marked up policy. I found that easier to differentiate with what we had before and what we are proposing. Under page 35, which it says ownership of the improvements. So all fixed improvements constructed or installed upon council property will be considered to be in the ownership of council from the time they are constructed or installed, as per the old policy. Then there were some exemptions, specified Crown ownership, council determining that the improvement owner be an alternate entity, and an existing agreement that has determined that the improvement owner is an alternate entity. I have some community groups in my division who their asset, their building, even though it's on council land, is not considered a council-owned building. Now, the addition you've put in this section says, in the case of any of the exceptions listed above, then all improvements constructed or installed upon council property will be considered to be in ownership of council at the end of the tenure period. So this is where I need that clarification. So for that example of a existing community group, the building is not considered council's asset, will this new policy change that and alleviate their needs for structural maintenance and flood insurance?
Through the Chair, there are two elements to that. The lease agreements that have been established on a number of properties, maybe 30, 40-year term leases, and the lease conditions are that on expiry of that lease, those improvements become the ownership of council, and that's that reference to exemption 1, that decision has been made historically, it's a legacy issue. They will have an opportunity to enter into a new agreement with council, in which case the agreement will have expired, those assets become council's owned assets, and then all of these conditions will apply. They have a choice. Their choice is to see out the remaining term of that lease, in which case they wouldn't accrue these benefits, but they would still have access to funds via the community grant fund arrangements. So in some respects, that would be their choice, and that choice will remain where an organisation needs to take a mortgage over a property, and as a result of that mortgage need a long 10-year period, in which case they would continue to own the building for the term of the lease that's agreed and would retain all those cost responsibilities for maintenance. Again, they would still have access to the community grant funds, but not directly delivered or directly funded by council, because it would sit outside of this policy. If it's an organisation that is a community organisation that is not on council-owned and controlled land, then none of this policy applies, because they're not in the ownership, they're not in the controlled land. They will still have access to the community grant fundings for maintenance and support and operations, but not directly administered by this policy.
Follow-up question?
Yes. Thank you for that. So I just want to make sure I'm 100% clear. So if they're in that current situation where they're in charge of structural and maintenance issues, if they decide to move over to this new lease agreement, those structures will be considered council assets, and we will be taking over that structural maintenance, the other maintenance, and the insurances that are associated with the building. If, however, they have a long-term mortgage, long-term plans for that site, this policy won't apply, and they will still have to manage that. I just wanted to make sure that's completely clear in my mind and also in the community's mind if they're watching today.
Yep. Through the Chair, that's absolutely correct. So I would just make one further comment, which is a number of organisations believe they own infrastructure and equipment on council-owned land. It's subject to the terms of the agreement that they're under, and we will discuss that individually with each of those community groups because of that vested sense of security of ownership of the building. In many instances, it's not the case, but we'll talk through each individual organisation on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. That clearly answers my question.
Councillor Hungerford.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll be supporting this today. I want to point out some realities. This is for community groups occupying council-owned and controlled land. Now, I believe this council provides more for its community and community groups than most councils do already. This is a further step on that again, but it comes at a price. The 3-year operating budget flow and budget briefing paper has been prepared, which outlines the operating and implementation expense from the 21-22 financial year, and that's the budget we're framing at the moment. The full implementation per annum of this is management coordination, 376,000, backlog maintenance, 729,000, statutory maintenance, 889,000, and water access charges, 274,000. That's a total of 2.3 million per annum. That will be borne by the wider community. I think that's justified because this is an investment in the community. I just wanted that to be very clear, that this money doesn't come from nowhere, it comes from the rate base. But I believe it's justified because it's an investment in the community, and just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Law.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. A couple of questions just to begin with, if I may. I feel, as with many things, the devil's in the detail, and subject to the decision we make today and then seeing how this is implemented, some of those things will come out. Just wanted to ask a number of questions. So firstly, there are quite significant differences between how a sporting club operates and the land and the council assets that it uses versus a community organisation that might be providing a historical or a museum offering for their community. Are you comfortable that we've got enough flexibility, or that we've got enough covered in the revised policy that will be able to address everyone's unique needs?
Through the Chair, I believe that there is really only one area that is unusual in this policy, and that's sports grounds maintenance. All other South East Queensland councils maintain and upkeep grounds and sports grounds. The feedback from the Sports and Recreation Development team is that it's so successful on the Sunshine Coast through the Sports Grant Funding Program that it should remain. So that's the one unusual item. Otherwise, I believe we have sufficient flexibility in the policy and the operational guidelines to administer it for some time. There's always the opportunity, if it isn't meeting those policy settings or achieving the outcomes of the community strategy, that we are able to adjust that.
Answer your question?
Yep, thank you. Next question is the commercial subleasing arrangements and council looking to receive up to 50% of that. What will be the process to determine the up to part of that part of statement in the policy? So for me, up to means anywhere on a sliding scale between 0 and 50%. How are we going to make that decision? What will be our terms of reference, our framework around that process?
Through the Chair, that's an ability to have some negotiating ability. The intent is that it's 50% remitted to council. That may be such a disincentive that the organisation doesn't proceed. If council has interest in that proceeding at a lower rate, then there's an ability through the CEO to make adjustments to that. So the intent is that it is 50%, but the up to is to give some delegation responsibility in the event that would dissuade the organisation entirely into entering into that commercial lease.
Okay. So follow up around that. What might be considered a commercial lease versus not a commercial lease, but one of our buildings might be used by two community organisations who are likely to be both not-for-profits, both with similar intent and purpose, but instead of because it's one building, there's one lease, and then the other organisation is involved, and all of the funds go back to the benefit of the community.
Through the Chair, the best example I could offer is the Pavilion Cafe at Kings Beach. That's currently part of a lease to a recreation club, and they accrue all the benefit from that commercial lease. We believe through this policy that Pavilion Cafe is an independent established commercial business, and therefore council should enter the lease directly with that organisation. The second example is an opportunity shop that takes up 75% of a community hall. The challenge there is twofold. Not simply that there's a commercial return from that, but the reason that hall is then not available to the community, which is its intended purpose. So there are two elements to that. A review of whether that commercial activity is justified, that it doesn't take away from the community's access to that facility, and that there's a reasonable return to council to support the maintenance of that building.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm not sure that I want to suggest that we do this as of now, but maybe is the wording in the policy that we should consider it being that the commercial arrangement is 50% subject to negotiation around unique situations. Because at the moment, up to 50% to me says 0 to 50%. How are we deciding? If the decision is it's 50% unless there are specific circumstances, maybe that ought to be considered in the policy. I don't know if we're able to sort of shift that around once we go through today's session.
Take that as a comment that you'd like the officers and the CEO to consider in the application of this policy, should it be supported. Okay. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Introducing a new policy is always fraught with challenges, and I think Councillor Law's done a good job of just highlighting some of those potential issues that will arise once this particular policy becomes implemented through a bit of a transition period. And I'd like to think that our staff will certainly assist those community groups or sporting associations through that particular transition period. I actually have confidence that you will. It's interesting hearing some of the past stories, and any particular policy situation affects different groups in a vast sort of array of different ways. And will we get it right? I'd like to think we've got the majority right. Will we get it 100% correct? I think that's always the challenge for any sort of public sort of organisation. But as Councillor Natoli has said, I think we are sort of making that progression towards assisting these community groups, sporting associations and the like in a better direction. So I will be supporting this. And I also just wanted to acknowledge yourself. As Councillor Suarez said earlier, it was a long weekend. You've put together all that information, the additional information about the community grants program, which has gone back to all of those different sporting community groups and the like. I mean, if anyone saw the list there, we invest significantly into these particular associations and clubs, and the proof is right there. That's quite a substantial program, but I think I will be supporting this based on the fact that we are tweaking it. We're making those changes to the policies which have been brought to our attention over the years, and so I do believe this is a step in the right direction, and I'm looking forward to seeing us aim towards that 100%.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Law, are you asking a question, or are you going to speak to it because you framed everything else as questions? Over to you.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. I wish to speak to the motion. 2014, certainly we're well due a review of the policy, and as others have already said, thank you very much for the work done by yourself and the team to arrive at this point. In the year of being councillor, I've had so many conversations with community organisations who are struggling and working so hard to raise funds and revenue. And then you hear and you learn that they're raising funds and revenue to upkeep, provide essential maintenance for the buildings that we own. And they're then applying for grants to the council that the council will then assess and judge and monitor and then award those grants. So I'm very excited and positive about the opportunities that we have through this to be able to allow those community groups, which are run by volunteers, and often in many of the community groups run by volunteers who are elders of our community, to allow them to get on and focus on the purpose of their organisation and why they stepped in to be volunteers. People who are retired, I don't think have retired, joined a community organisation to then become an asset manager. It's probably not what they set out to do. They wanted to give back to their community, to enable their community to have greater benefits that aren't readily available to them at the moment. So thank you for the work that you've done. I'm really pleased to be at this position. As Councillor Cox said, I'm looking forward to how this is going to turn out. The devil's in the detail, but I think we are going to a position that is just so much better than where we have been at the moment. So thank you. Obviously you can probably tell I'm speaking to support the motion, and I hope that we're able to do that today. And it will really be another big step forward in supporting and implementing our community strategy, where we're wanting to provide our community with spaces and places that they can do that are accessible to them. And I'm just going through the list of buildings that we own that are not accessible to everyone in our community because those organisations don't have the resources and the capacity to make the buildings accessible. So I'm really looking forward to this. Yes, it comes at a cost, but it comes at a cost that we've been ducking and weaving since the policy came in 2014. So now we can get on and do the work, support our community, and really help implement the community strategy. So thank you very much, and I hope that we've got support from everyone today to go to the next step.
Thank you, Councillor Law. I'd just like to note that you do have a special interest as a portfolio councillor. So, Councillor Suarez, are you speaking to the motion now? Or your question? Yep, correct.
Andrew, just want to reiterate a couple of the comments that Councillor Law made. I think that this is definitely a vast improvement. But something else Councillor Law brought up, devil in the detail, and one of his questions came out about sports ground maintenance and how that's the anomaly in this policy. That's now raised some red flags for me. So when I have a look at the grant funding that we've been supplied, typically sports ground maintenance is one of the most expensive items that we have. And a couple of examples here are Caloundra Sharks Junior Rugby League, upgrade of the field, $183,000, and we supplied $30,000 in grant funding. Another one is Kawana Tennis Club, request for $120,000, and we supplied $30,000 in terms of grant funding. So these are quite high costs to those sporting clubs that are difficult for them to meet. So I guess the first question is, why did we choose to remove that level of maintenance from this current policy?
Through the Chair. Sorry, I'll just clarify, it hasn't been removed. The sports grant funding has been in place for a number of years. When we were benchmarking against other South East Queensland councils, we identified that every one of those councils undertook the maintenance of their sports fields. The feedback from the Sports and Recreation Development Team officers was that the grant funding for sports fields and the maintenance by those organisations of the sports fields was at such a high standard, at such a high level, they wouldn't want to see that changed. So that's the reason for the policy setting excluding sports grounds maintenance. I'm not sure if I can comment further on the level of contribution. That's probably more in the community or the sports development space, but certainly that was the thinking behind it and the reason that it was excluded.
Thank you, and thank you for that clarification. It wasn't removed, it was just excluded. So this feedback to have it excluded from the policy, that just came from internal council officers, not from the community. Have we had any feedback from the community groups, particularly the sporting groups, around sports ground maintenance as to their desire for council to take on some of that responsibility?
Through the Chair, we have had that conversation. It is just an individual conversation between property and sports and recreation. And of course they have those ongoing discussions and relationships with those community groups. And that's our understanding of the feedback that's received from those organisations, that they're happy with that, the extent of the funding and the support from council for sports grounds maintenance. So we're not hearing anything contrary to that at this stage.
Thank you. Further question?
Yes. I'm just going to play out a scenario here. Let's say we have a sporting club, a soccer club, and they need to upgrade their lighting. And they operate at night time, so they need that lighting to perform their club duties. They can't afford to upgrade the lighting, their membership goes down and their club dissolves. What happens then? So the fields are not at a standard where it can be utilised, they're no longer there. Do we step in? Like what happens in that scenario?
Through the Chair, yeah, this is a known issue. Particularly around lux levels, so not necessarily that the lighting is inoperative, just the lux levels are not significantly high enough for the sports or the events that they might host. So for instance, an international or a national cricket competition. Because that's a known issue, that has been scheduled into the capital works budget and the sub-program for sports and recreation. There's a significant amount of money set aside for sports field lighting upgrades over the next 3 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Answer your question.
Just final question. As Councillor Cox mentioned, putting in a new policy, you're not going to know if you've got it right until once you've implemented it and you see, things come out. And I'll reiterate, I think this is a really great improvement. What's the opportunity, and you did answer this in my additional information. What's the opportunity if we implement this policy, if it gets up to date, and say 6 months down the track or 12 months down the track after people have signed the new tenure documents, clear discrepancies or inefficiencies in this policy come forward, what's our ability to amend the policy? Do we have to go through this whole process of putting in a new policy, or can we just amend it? What's our opportunity to be flexible with it in the short term?
Yeah. Through the Chair, absolutely. The intent is for the strategic policy to be that umbrella document that sets out the intents and the purpose. Below that is an operational guideline. And the operational guideline will be able to deliver with those nuances. So, for instance, we hadn't considered that there would be children's play equipment. One of the questions we were asked post the last discussion was, is play equipment part of your statutory maintenance requirements? At the time it wasn't known. Very easy to adjust that as a schedule within the agreements. So those minor ones, those oversights, such as stormwater drainage and the maintenance of stormwater, things that we hadn't considered that are flushing out now, we have absolute control to moderate that and to include them. If they're more significant, we really need to be thinking about that now, because once we issue those licences and permits, significant amendments then need to have those withdrawn and reissued. So we do have to be very careful, but we have been thinking and considering this policy for 12 months to try and etch out all of those exceptions that have been introduced since 2014. So this is trying to get a standard process across all of the sports, recreation and community groups. In itself, that's fraught, because having those standard agreements don't always apply. So we've generated as much flexibility in that strategic policy as we could without deviating from its overall intended purpose, which is to support the community groups, support their development and allow them to focus on their community programming.
Thank you, Mr. Tapp. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just sum up, I suppose. I'm really pleased with the work that you've done. There's definitely a clear need from the community, as evidenced through the grants-based process. We're paying for it anyway. I think it's going to streamline the process. One of the benefits you mentioned, it will allow those groups to focus on what they're supposed to do. I think having some flexibility going forward, should we have not hit the nail on the head, gives me some comfort, so I'm happy to support this policy today.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you. Yeah, you've heard from everyone here today, and I just wanted to personally thank Mr. Tout for this work. For someone who spends a considerable amount of discretionary funding and previous divisional funding on community facilities, I get that they're the most important thing that you can actually attribute funds to. I've been to so many openings of the years of expansions of buildings. Currently I'm looking at building a new storage shed and cafeteria area for the Bedina Soccer Club at Mountain Creek in Brightwater. It's great to see that money is going back to the community, because that's what the community appreciates, a helping hand. Ted touched on it before. Councillor Ted was talking about the grants program and the new money in this program. I'm not sure we've solved this well enough today. This is a substantial, not just a slight overhaul of previous policy. This is enormous. Over $700,000 in backlog maintenance work that we're going to do as part of this project. If you actually go through the material that staff have provided us, a number of community grants are actually issued for general maintenance. So a lot of our community groups are applying to council for general maintenance, and that's what we're allocating the funding towards. So you think about this opportunity where you've got new money to do that. Those existing grants can actually go to outcomes on the ground that people can see that are very, very tangible and not just standard maintenance. Mr. Tout, I think this is fantastic. I appreciate the recent workshop that you took us through. I appreciate that councillors are considering all of this as part of the upcoming budget. And I'm hoping that residents will see as part of the new budget that's in June, some significant benefits just like this. Well done to you and your team. This is absolutely fantastic, and it's what we needed many years ago.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Kirsten Turner, you closing?
I've spoken, but I just have a question.
Sure.
I want to follow up on what Councillor Maria talked about, where a community organisation may own its own building, and there is an option for it to be transferred. But if it has a mortgage, is the option there for council to take over the mortgage if the organisation wants to move into that new? Is that a possibility?
Through the Chair, it is something we had a look at. It's the issue of mortgage security, and our recommendation would be that council would not take on that liability, but it is an option, but not considered in this policy, so no.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Are you ready to close?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your comments and questions. And I think there is general support here for this. Yes, like Councillor Cox said, often when you do these major reviews, there'll be certain aspects that you may not get, but I have every confidence that Andrew does understand the needs of our community organisations and understands that if there is a gap there, that maybe in 12 months or even earlier, that would come back to us as a council. I would hope, Madam CEO, that in 12 months we'll actually get a report to say what the stress levels and how this policy has been translated within our organisations, to see whether we've actually started to see a release of their energy back into the community work that they do, and they're not asset managers as they have been. So I would hope that we would get that feedback and see that this has actually been a really positive step forward for us as an organisation supporting our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Natoli. Councillors, I'll put the officer recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, Andrew. And again, once to Paul Skillen and the team, as Councillor Dixon pointed out, a tremendous body of work. Thank you very much. Well done. So look, we've now, I think, well overdue to take a break for morning tea. I'll call it for 11:05, if that's a sufficient time. 11:05, back to resume the meeting. Suspend the meeting for morning tea.
Well, good morning, councillors. My apologies for missing the earlier session this morning. I was a guest of the Governor and Mrs. De Jersey and the Premier for breakfast in Brisbane at Government House this morning, and they pass on their regards to the Sunshine Coast Council and to the Sunshine Coast community. On that note, we'll get down to the next item, which is 8.4, development application for a variation request at 14 to 30 Henebery Road, Burnside, and I invite Bryce to give us a presentation. Thank you, Bryce.
Morning, councillors. This is to present a development application for the Henebery Road site, and it is, as the Mayor said, for a preliminary approval for low-density residential uses, and it includes a variation request to essentially backzone the site to low-density residential. The site is located at the extreme western edge of Nambour.
Can we just turn that other one off there? Otherwise that'll... That's all right. Thanks, Bryce. You're right.
The extreme western edge of Nambour, near the urban growth management boundary. So it's currently zoned combination zoning of emerging community and community facilities zone, as you can see in the yellow. So the background to this site is that many years ago under Maroochydore Plan 2000, the site was zoned neighbourhood residential, which is the equivalent of the current planning scheme's low-density residential. And at the time, Sundale applied for an application for development approval for retirement and aged care facility at this site. 2010 and 2015, and those approvals were reflected in the current Sunshine Coast planning scheme. That's why it's zoned emerging community, annotated for those uses. The proposal currently before you is for preliminary approval to apply the provisions of the low-density residential zone. And for preliminary approval for low-density uses which include things like detached houses on traditional lots, duplexes, etc. And it is also, and this is an important aspect, to reduce the height limit from the current 12 meters, which is associated with community facility zoning, back down to 8.5 meters, which is consistent with the surrounding area and consistent with low-density residential. And officers are also proposing to limit the number of dual occupancies on this site because of its distance from the Nambour CBD, basically. The major considerations in the assessment, the site is quite removed from medical, community and commercial facilities in Nambour. It's approximately 5 kilometers away. The site is surplus to Sundale's needs and intent. They intend to concentrate on refurbishing their Doolan Street site, which is central to Nambour. And I guess that probably needs a bit of explanation. It's surplus now because at the time of this old approval for the Henebery Road site, the Doolan Street site was fully developed for 40 independent living units and 200 aged care beds. So it had no development potential. Subsequent to that, Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme increased the height limit for that Doolan Street site to 4 stories and then again to 6 stories and 23 meters, which gave a lot of development potential to Sundale for that site. And Council issued an approval about 2 years ago for the redevelopment of that site, which would now allow for 490 retirement units and 266 aged care beds. So from Sundale's perspective, they now have more than adequate land available to meet what they determined to be the need. Now they submitted an economic needs assessment by macro plan, which identified the needs for these 2 uses within the Burnside catchment, which is quite an extensive catchment, till 2026 and beyond. And basically the economic needs assessment concluded that there was more than adequate approved development applications for the life of the current planning scheme to meet the need for both independent living, for retirement, and for aged care beds. We had this peer reviewed by CDM Smith, and they concurred that for the life of this planning scheme, there was adequate land available. So the other consideration was, would the Henebery Road site be suitable for low-density residential? And I guess the answer to that, when we looked at that, is yes. It is consistent with low-density residential developing all around it, particularly to the east. And that consists primarily of detached houses on 600 square meter lots. But it's probably important to stress that if council approves this, what is essentially a back zoning of this site and a reduction in the scale of the height back to low density residential, it certainly doesn't preclude a retirement facility. So the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme makes retirement facilities code-accessible in all low-density zones. So there would have to be a further development application, of course. So if council determines today to backzone this site, it doesn't approve anything. The owner of that site would have to come in with another development application to either reconfigure it or for, in this case, a code-accessible retirement aged care facility, but at a lower heights limit. So the application was advertised for 30 days because it was included a variation request, and there were only 4 submissions received, one from Energex because there's an Energex easement traversing the site from north to south, and 3 submissions from adjoining neighbors in close proximity. No one really objected to the proposal to backzone the site. The neighbors wanted to ensure that council would impose similar upgrades to Henebery Road and Burnside Road if the zoning was changed. So we have recommended conditions. Should council determine to approve this, to protect the Energex easement from development, to ensure it remains open space or road reserve, to secure the same road upgrades as were conditioned for the old retirement aged care approval, and to rehabilitate the two east-west riparian corridors that traverse the site. So council is recommending approval of this preliminary approval and variation request, and that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Bryce.
Are there any questions?
Somebody to move? Councillor Law, thank you. Councillor Johnston, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor Law?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Bryce, for your report and all of the detailed information contained in the information for us, which is extremely helpful to understand what's in front of us today. I would obviously, speaking in support of the motion, this particular area in Nambour is part of the growing residential subdivisions that are taking place at the edge of town. But what is the difference and why is the variation there? Well, this particular part, even though it's within close proximity to Nambour, it sits at the end of about 1 kilometre of gravel road at the edge of rural residential. So we're right at the boundary of the local area plan of Nambour. So when you listen to why is it no longer an aged care facility, why are we looking to remove from that? Well, aged care, Sundale is very good at aged care, and it's currently looking at putting together very much a high dependency aged care services and facilities at its other locations in Nambour that are right alongside, within 1 kilometre of the Nambour hospital. So their interest in building a high needs aged care unit out at the end of Henebery Road, 5 kilometres from town. And if you had an emergency out there, you'd actually be better off. They would probably need to put in a helipad up there, because if you had a problem during peak hour, you simply wouldn't be able to get there in time to have any benefit, and then return back to the hospital to help the people who are in trouble. It is in a significantly, it's at the end of a one-way road. There is no other way out. You have to come right back through a whole range of pinch points, depending on the time of day, will depend on how quickly you get out of there. So it really would be, if you had an emergency, you'd really be looking for a helicopter to help you. That seems a little bit excessive. But to return this back to low-density residential makes a lot of sense. We hear often around the demands for housing at the moment. Clearly this isn't going to satisfy an immediate demand for housing, but it will help us to our future needs of housing for our growing communities and young families moving into the area. I met with the local residents on a number of occasions during the consultation process, and I can confirm the information from Bryce that even beyond those who submitted to this, other people in the community are generally in favour of this becoming low-density residential, and part of the reason for that being that we're bringing down the building height to something that is more in keeping with the rest of the area, from 12.5 down to 8.5. There is a real benefit of doing this in this particular part of Nambour, and in keeping with the rest of the area, and also we'll be able to maintain quite a lot of the vegetation there. Bryce has mentioned about the riparian zones, and there is a substantial Energex easement through that, which helps us protect some of the vegetation and native vegetation that's on there. So I'm certainly in support of this variation. I think there's a lot of benefit for the future growth in the region, supporting future growth of the whole coast, and also as this develops, I think it's likely to develop more rapidly as low-density residential than it might as a aged care facility, and that means that we will get closer to better road upgrades. So the conditions that Bryce has mentioned around the improvements on the external boundaries to improve the gravel road. That will be a huge bonus for the people there. It will improve sight lines and also take a crest out of the road. That's good. And then we get our better connectivity through our footpath networks. So I think there's a lot to be gained from this. And should someone see a need for a retirement type facility, that is still possible. It's just about that high need aged care. That's the only thing that is disappearing, but the benefits outweigh that. And there is also sufficient work being done by Sundale to provide a high need aged care. And I'm sure we'll be hearing about that in the future. So thank you very much, and I'm looking for support on this request.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Babarowski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. Certainly I thought it was very intelligent to look at the 15% dual occupancy constraint. I just wondered whether we have either a mechanism or at least a way of encouraging that 15% to be dispersed and not clustered as part of the development.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we do have a mechanism for that. So the supplementary table of assessment that we're recommending basically says that dual occupancy lots would have to be identified on an approved plan of development. That's where we get to look at it as part of any future application, and mustn't exceed 15%. So 15% is basically very low, but reasonably consistent with Council's last 3 approvals for that outcome in effectively reasonably remote locations. But the applicant would be compelled to provide Council with a plan of development identifying those dual occupancy lots. We then assess, are they in an appropriate spot? Are they in a corner lot? Are they big enough? Are they dispersed within it? So they definitely wouldn't be beside each other, wouldn't be in close proximity, and being limited to 15%, really it'd be hardly noticeable.
No further speakers? I'll go to Councillor Law to close. No need to close. Thank you. Councillors will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Bryce and team.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillors, 8.5 is a development application for a variation request to reconfigure a lot at 21 Petrie Creek Road, Nambour. And I pass to Barry Bolt to give us a presentation, supported by Mark Cannell. Thank you.
Thank you. Today we have item 8.5 is a development application for a development permit to reconfigure a lot, 1 into 17 residential lots, new road and drainage reserve, and also a preliminary approval for a material change of use to include a variation request to change the effect of the planning scheme to apply the low density res provisions to the site. The application is before Council today due to it being a variation request. The locality plan on the screen here shows the 2.68 hectare site. It's located east of the Nambour Business District. It's surrounded essentially by low density residential properties to the east and a medium density residential zone to the west. There's the school with the associated agricultural college to the north, and some low density rural res type properties to the south. The site was zoned a neighbourhood residential zone in Maroochydore plan, the superseded planning scheme before the current scheme. The current scheme now zoned the site as limited development, which was predominantly due to a vegetation that was on the site at that time. In 2018, Council approved an operational works application to clear the majority of said vegetation from the site, as it was deemed to comprise weed species and not native vegetation. The site contains a single detached dwelling at the moment at its southern extent. and it also is encumbered by some easements for electrical and bulk water supply infrastructure. So the proposal is for 17 lots, which is the area on the screen showed as the yellow area will be the development area. That would be effectively the low density residential zone. As I mentioned, its development is located in the cleared area of the site, which was already cleared, and the balance area of vegetation around the creek line will be preserved and is proposed to be dedicated to council as drainage reserve. In terms of assessment considerations, the limited development zone is a zone typically applied to land that is constrained for a number of reasons. In this case, it was, as I mentioned, the vegetation predominantly that was the constraint. The vegetation was determined at assessment, at a detailed assessment, to not be native. It was weed species, so it was lawfully cleared under an operational works permit in 2018. So the appropriateness of considering development on this zone now is dependent upon whether or not it is considered that that zone remains relevant to the site, and given the constraint has now been removed, it's considered that it's not relevant and development is likely appropriate for the site in some form because of the mapping error, essentially, of a mapping native veg. The development is essentially the same density and form as surrounding development and is able to satisfy all provisions of the scheme required for that development. The recommendation of this report is that dual occupancies be limited to impact assessment. That's due to a access road limitation. There was referral requirements, and as I mentioned, electrical infrastructure and bulk water main affecting the site with easements. Both entities were consulted through the application and have recommended that certain provisions be applied to the development if approved. Predominantly a setback provision for overhead power lines from the easement for all future dwellings, and that lots 16 and 17 as proposed be amalgamated to just provide one lot so that the constraint can be avoided into the future. The recommended plan amendments for officers are shown in red on this plan. It's essentially to approve the 16 lots rather than 17, limit the approval to not provide dual occupancies, and to amend Hatchet lot 3 so that it becomes Hatchet lot, rather than a council-owned reserve, and then that bioretention basin becomes part of the larger drainage reserve system. The recommendation is approval of 16 lots with the associated access easements, road and drainage reserve, and also to approve the variation request. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Someone to move? Councillor Law, thank you. The seconder, Councillor Johnston. You like to open, Councillor Law?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for the report, the information around this variation. So the highlights here really are that the parcel of land we're talking about is surrounded on either side by other residential that has already been built, some of it quite recently, some of it is more mature. In 2014, this particular piece of land, as we have heard, has been incorrectly zoned, and as it had turned out, in 2018, a operational works given to clear the land of the weed species, which now makes it ideal position to offer again some more residential options around the edges of Nambour. I'm really pleased to see the connectivity created through the footpaths, that we've got a provision in there to come directly out into the footpath network. Improving the situation alongside Petrie Creek Road is excellent, and connecting through the other residential areas there. So having really established back in 2018 with the clearing of the land of weed species, we're now saying that we're ready, well, what's the next use of the land? And the next use is really around low density residential. The parcel of land is surrounded, and actually in that location, as you look across out from there, you're looking into the farmland over towards the waterways and so on. So it's a great spot, it makes sense, and I would encourage your support, subject to any questions you've got, of allowing this to go through to low density residential. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, question through the Mayor to whoever can answer this one. It might be the DA team or James Rupre. How often are we actually seeing these type of requests before council where we've got a limited development zone and we actually endorsed the planning scheme? It was pretty serious to say if it's limited development, you're not going to see anything on it. How often are developers actually coming in and proving our layers incorrect? Is this usual? Are we seeing much of this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is the first application of its nature that we've seen where the zoning of limited development has been proven to be incorrect. What that shows is that when the planning scheme was drafted, although it was done on aerial photography, particularly for the native vegetation, what it allows is the applicant to actually demonstrate that those constraints may not be there and therefore be able to be suitable for development as such as this one.
Thank you for that. And just if I could speak, obviously the previous item and this item, I think they're actually fantastic. It shows that we're willing to accommodate population growth. And for me, I don't see this as infill development in a way. Infill for me is existing development sites that could, in a way, in urban precincts, deliver an uplift. So if you've got a traditional home or a few homes, you reconfigure those blocks and you might put medium density. This is actually in keeping with Nambour. It's not significantly changing the locality. And I think the important point here today is that the growth is being focused around our local centres. You know, Nambour traditionally, being a hinterland town, has changed, and the ability to bring more people into that local suburb has been great for local businesses. And when we talk more broadly about population growth on the Sunshine Coast, it's not just about putting that population growth along the beach from Caloundra to Maroochydore. That's not what it's about. Again, the officers are being very, very smart to say that we have got these opportunities within our townships to actually enhance the population. I do wonder though in the new planning scheme, like Nambour, if we could take an opportunity to revisit, well, what sites can we actually uplift? Are there more sites like this? I know we're saying the mapping's pretty good, but are there some sites locally like this where small lot subdivisions can be done without disrupting the character of the town? I will be supporting this today.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. No further speakers. I'll go to Councillor Law to close. Not necessary. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen, for the presentation. We'll move on to item 8.6, which is the proposed planning scheme policy for development works amendment. And we've got a presentation from Roma when she arrives, and here they come. Roma and Steve. Welcome, Roma, Steve. You're on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors and the CEO. In October of last year, Council resolved to amend the planning scheme policy for development works and place it on public consultation. The planning scheme policy sets out Council's requirements across various infrastructure assets and defines the standards and procedures for contributed assets. The proposed amendment has been prepared in response to the outcomes of an audit committee report on contributed assets presented to Council in 2017, and also follows a collaborative review of the standards and specifications by Council's asset custodians. The proposed amendment seeks to refine and update the standards and specifications in the current planning scheme policy to ensure that they are relevant and consistent with up-to-date engineering practices and to improve the quality of contributed assets. This report presents to Council the outcomes from public consultation on the proposed amendment and seeks Council's endorsement to adopt the proposed amendment with changes. The proposed amendment was placed on public consultation from the 2nd of November to the 4th of December of last year. The consultation and communication strategy implemented during the public consultation period included a public notice published in the Courier Mail and online in the Sunshine Coast Daily, as well as in the Courier Mail. The public notice and amendment documentation made available at all council offices, libraries and on council's website. Distribution of a news flash to regular planning scheme users and community members that have previously expressed an interest in receiving information about the planning scheme matters. A dedicated web page on Council's Have Your Say, which included an online submission form, and briefings to key stakeholder groups including the UDIA, OSCA and affiliates. Council received a total of 12 submissions during the public consultation period. 10 submissions were in relation to the proposed amendment, and 2 submissions raised matters that were outside the scope of the proposed amendment. A summary of the issues and concerns raised in submissions and Council's proposed response and recommendations is outlined in the consultation report, which is included as attachment 1 of the agenda report. The 10 submissions received in relation to the proposed amendment generally outline support for the proposed amendment, but raised a range of issues and concerns which related to curb construction techniques and pavement thickness requirements for road infrastructure, the design requirements for stormwater management, lighting requirements, particularly in terms of the standards for road and public lighting, and to minimise the impacts on wildlife such as turtle nesting areas. The desired standards of service and embellishments for local parks, as well as the maintenance of park infrastructure, the design requirements for landscaping infrastructure, including matters relating to landscape design for wildlife and bushfire issues, and the design requirements for constructed water bodies. Consultation has occurred with relevant technical officers within Council in the consideration of these issues. Following the consideration of submissions, a range of drafting changes are recommended to the public consultation version of the proposed amendment to address the issues raised in submissions, to amend a drafting error, and to provide further guidance and clarification. This includes updating references to guidance documents to reflect new documentation and versions, and changes to the sections relating to the stormwater management, local parks, landscape infrastructure and constructed water bodies to provide further guidance and or clarification in relation to certain design requirements. Appendix A, the amendment instrument, and Appendix B, the explanatory memorandum of the agenda report, provide details on the proposed post-consultation changes to the planning scheme policy. The proposed text changes are highlighted in yellow in Appendix A. The proposed changes to the planning scheme policy are not considered to make the amendment significantly different to the version that was placed on public notification, and therefore it is considered that the revised planning scheme policy does not require re-notification. It is therefore recommended that Council proceed to adopt the proposed amendment with changes. If Council decides to adopt the proposed amendment, the next steps include providing a copy of the consultation report to all submitters, placing a public notice in a local newspaper, and preparing the planning scheme incorporating the amendment for commencement. Thank you.
Thank you, Roma. Someone prepared to move the report? Councillor Johnston, thank you. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Dixon, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor Johnston?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Roma, Stephen, a great deal of work has gone into this. It's an extensive document. It's been very comprehensively examined and the necessary amendments made. I'd like to congratulate the Council's planning staff on the work that they've done. I think it's also the consultation and with the public and any people who are the submitters has been exceptional, and encourage all councillors to support this amendment, this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, you've got to be really interested to read all this. It's actually quite technical, and I've actually struggled with a bit of it myself. I had to go back and read it again, and I do wonder though, in terms of the submissions we got, is it fair to say that a lot of our responses were back from the industry? It seemed like a lot of the questions that we got were very technical, and people had extremely solid technical knowledge of the provisions in the scheme. Is it fair to say that industry did consult quite well on this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the submissions were quite varied, but yes, we did receive a couple of submissions from industry groups.
One point, actually I'll ask the question, then I'll make the point. Is there any benefit in doing this now for the new planning scheme? You look at the new scheme that we're looking to endeavour on, getting this work done now and embedding this in a change. Do you see a benefit in making the new scheme much faster to deploy? Is there benefit in doing this now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't know whether Steve might wish to comment on that, but at this stage, the purpose of this report is really to bring the standards up to date, and I guess leaving it to the new planning scheme, there's a bit of a delay in doing that, but also this will sort of filter into the new planning scheme, so there won't be probably as many changes, I guess, when we go down the path of preparing the planning scheme policy as part of that project.
Good answer. I'm very happy with that. It might seem like a very small issue, but I read with interest the road widths and pavement widths and the depth of those. Even in new estates like Harmony, I don't know if anyone's been out there recently, but even new roads that developers are building that are less than 2 years old are already starting to fall apart. Now, one could say that heavy haulage trucks are illegally using those main roads and not using the designated tracks that they are supposed to in their development agreement, but the roads are falling apart, and I wonder if some of that is because they're not even meeting the current standards. In that same report that I read, it also talks about the potential cost savings to this council. So if developers are actually doing the right thing and building those infrastructure items to the standard they should, we're not going to have to come in prematurely, under that 20-year mark to dig these roads up and spend ratepayer dollars where we shouldn't be on some of these assets. So it might sound like a small example, but if you actually extrapolate that out across the region with new developments, if people aren't doing the right thing, it's costing ratepayers a lot of money. A step in the right direction, and again, there's a lot of information there, and I just appreciate that we're pushing this through, we're getting those changes in well ahead of the new scheme. We're not just sitting, we're not waiting, we're not going to wait 3 or 4 years, we do it now because it's needed now.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Babarowski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And a quick question along the lines of Councillor Dixon's observation about some of our greenfield developments. Can you just clarify how these proposed amendments could apply or may apply or not apply to existing PDAs or infrastructure agreements?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure whether Nick Cooney may wish to respond to that question, but it's my understanding that they will apply to some extent to those greenfield areas.
Mr. Mayor, if I might just add, the level of, as I understand the situation, the level of compliance required depends upon the nature of the infrastructure agreement that we have in place for these different areas. So, for example, we know, it just depends on the detail of what the agreements that were struck at the time and whether these standards specifically called up. But in a number of the PDAs they are, so they should be applicable, but we need to go back and check each development agreement to be confident of exactly.
All right, no further speakers. We'll put, would you like to close, Councillor Johnson?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Roma and Steve. Councillors, we move to item 8.7, which are to do with delegations for the Chief Executive Officer around Kawana Waters Master Plan. The report's been distributed and read. There is no presentation. If there are questions, we can deal with those. Someone prepared to move? Councillor Cox, thank you. Councillor Dixon, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor Cox?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Just for the sake of those watching online, probably a bit like the other one, it's quite technical. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of points. Firstly, development within the Kawana waters is not subject to the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme. Instead, it's subject to a different planning process outlined in the DCP1, which has been in place since 1996. The majority of the master plan area has been developed, and it is envisaged that the Kawana waters will be completed by 2030, so approximately 9 years remaining of that development agreement. Once complete, the master plan area will then become subject to the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme. So the CEO's existing overarching delegation does not cover the Kawana Waters master plan applications. The Council's power in relation to the Kawana Waters master plan applications are conferred under the Kawana Waters Development Agreement and, as I said, the DCP1. And these are not included in the list of acts which the overarching delegation applies to. There are some existing delegations for Kawana Waters which are no longer fit for purpose. They are cumbersome, contain inconsistent delegation criteria, and do not cover all types of master plan applications. It is proposed in this item to replace those existing delegations with broader new delegation capabilities which capture all Kawana Waters master plan applications. It will also simplify the decision-making process for Kawana Waters master plan applications, providing a single, consistent set of delegation criteria for those decisions. Consequently, it will assist in streamlining the decision-making process for Kawana Waters master plan applications. When I read through the report, and obviously last week we had a bit of a presentation from staff as well, I wanted to ensure that there are enough safeguards in the new delegations that can still come back to council, and I'm just going to highlight that they are in fact included in these delegations, so that the matter can be referred to council when a councillor requests that the matter be considered by full council. The application relates to a matter of significant public interest, and the application includes significant conflict with one or more of council's adopted policy positions. So I'm quite satisfied that those safeguards have been considered duly in these delegation powers. So, councillors, I will certainly be supporting this here today and just encourage you to do the same.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, a quick question. I'll take a different angle on this. Whilst I'm comfortable and the divisional council is comfortable, I wonder if the CEO had any comments to offer. Obviously, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with your job, and Kawana is a very, very big area to be policing in terms of planning. It doesn't sit with the planning scheme, but there's some enormous responsibilities on council and yourself. I just wonder if you would offer any insights or thoughts on these delegations.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mr Mayor. The CEO's delegations for council are an enormous number of delegations. In fact, you signed off some recent delegations at the last OM. There's a pack about this big of delegations. So clearly, as an individual standing here before you, I don't do that on my own. I carry those delegations through the expertise and the incredible depth of talent that we have across council. So as it relates to this particular item, I'm very confident that I have an enormously capable planning system and planning team within the council that can provide the right level of advice and allow me to carry out the delegations to the best of our ability. And as Councillor Cox pointed out, there are elements within this delegation that if we feel that this needs to be brought to the full council, or if councillors feel we need to have those conversations more broadly, that is not shut off by creating this delegation today.
Thank you. No further speakers. Go to Councillor Cox to close. Not necessary. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you to the officers. 8.8 is the March financial performance report. I invite Isaac to give us a presentation. Thank you, Isaac.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good morning. All good? Oh, the colour. Okay. Thank you. I'm on TV, so I've got to look good.
Good morning, Mr Mayor, councillors and all council executive staff. Today I'm here to present to you the financial performance report for March of 2021. So council, our financials are tracking well to budget at the end of March, with a $98.4 million operating result being ahead of budget by $8.6 million. The favourable variance consists of revenue above budget of $5.1 million, as well as expenses below budget of $3.5 million. So revenues are similar to previous months, with an increase in waste collection services resulting in cleansing charges above the budget of $2 million. Additional revenue received for council's holiday parks, refuse tip fees, and our development services and application fees are also ahead of budget. In terms of operational expenditure, we're currently below budget, with corporate savings costs of about $1.8 million being recognised, the balance being reduced expenditure for materials and services. From a capital works program point of view, progressed at 62% of budget, after total expenditure of $177 million. Council's core capital works program is 50% complete. We're currently trying to aim for that 90% completion for year end. Council, our cash at the end of March is $242 million, with a total debt balance of $543 million. And the recommendation today is that Council receive and note the report titled March 2021 Financial Performance Report.
Someone prepare to move? Councillor Hungerford, thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Natoli, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be brief. Council has a positive operating result, smaller than what I'd like to see, but in the current economic climate, that's an excellent result to have a small positive result there. As of the 31st of March 2021, $427.5 million of operating revenue has been achieved, which is $5.1 million more than the current budget for the same period. That's where we are in expenditure in our capital works at this point in time. As of the 31st of March, $326 million of the $330 million budget year to date has been expended, which has resulted in an underspend of $4.1 million or 1.3%. But that's in the timing of when things are paid for, so that's well on track. So, in summary, as of 31st of March 2021, $176.7 million of Council's $287 million in capital works program has been financially expended. So we're well on track to complete most of our capital works program by the end of the year, which is a healthy result. The core capital program has progressed 56.9% of budget and actual spend of $102 million, which was stated before, and our corporate major projects have progressed 85.4%, and the Sunshine Coast Airport runway project has progressed 80% of their respective annual budgets. Very healthy result and a strong position to be in at this point of time, and of course we need that going into next year's budget. But another excellent result, and my congratulations to the finance team.
Thank you, Councillor Hungerford. Councillor Johnston.
Just one question, Mr Mayor, and I'm not sure whether Isaac is able to answer this or whether it will require a referral to other members of the ELT. But in relation to the capital grants funding projects that we have been advised of and have received, I'm just wondering how they're going time-wise. Are they all going to be completed within timeframes, etc.?
Through you, Mr Mayor, so the largest component is the COVID Works for Queensland, which is the state government grant. We've asked for a delay on the Nambour foreshore project, but that's the only one that I'm aware of. So all the others are on track with 30 June as per the grant requirements. So.
Thank you.
Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that may have just answered my question. I might ask it a different way. So in regards to I think it's the federal grants that we were made aware of late last year, and there's a number listed in the financial report. I think it was grant funding round 2. That might be the one I'm referencing. Did most of those projects have a due date of, was it December 31st?
Through the chair, that's correct. So the federal government, that second round was December 2021.
Can I just ask, what is the process there on, some of those projects which we may anticipate may not actually be constructed this year and completed? Is anyone in advance writing to the federal government seeking sort of any extension on any of those projects, or is it just too early to tell?
Through the Chair, so it's probably too early to tell, but we would write to the federal government and ask for an extension. So it's not uncommon. So it's an issue amongst a lot of local governments in Queensland because it will be handing a fair amount of money to deliver projects in a tight time frame. So.
Okay, if there are no further speakers, go to Councillor Hungerford to close. Not necessary.
Mr Mayor, another strong result. We've had that consistently all the way through. We just need to maintain that focus into the future.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you, Isaac. We move to item 8.9. Again, there's no presentation. The documents have been distributed. Mr Matheson's here if there are any questions. I just note that there is a confidential section to 8.9, but is someone prepared to move? Councillor Terry Landsberg, thank you. Seconded, Councillor O'Prey, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor Landsberg? No, well, sorry. No, we speak to the motion, yes. No, that's fine, okay. I've got something I'd like to say in relation to the matter, so I'll do that now. And councillors, I'd like to seek your support in the recommendations in this report, and I will certainly be supporting it. And importantly, on November 18 last year, we made a significant decision that will take the Maroochydore City Centre project forward under the partnership arrangement with one of the nation's leading urban developers, and indeed I think Australia's biggest private developer, Walker Corporation. As this report rightly points out, from that point the operating approach for this project fundamentally changed, as it should given the nature of the development agreement and the expertise and capabilities that Walker Corporation bring to this very important project. Inevitably, this means change for Council and for SunCentral Maroochydore Private Limited. And the governance review currently underway will help us to define a new roadmap for both organisations in respect of this project. That said, SunCentral will play a key role as we build our partnership with Walker Corporation. I look forward to working with the organisation and its board on this journey ahead in creating the outstanding city centre for which the Sunshine Coast residents can be justifiably proud. I do, however, want to acknowledge that we would not have reached this point if it had not been for the careful, determined and insightful leadership demonstrated over the last 6 years by SunCentral Chair Dr. Doug McTaggart. When I first spoke to Doug about this role in 2015, I have to admit that I was a little taken back that our council had been fortunate enough to attract the interest of someone of the calibre of Doug McTaggart. Doug brought an incredible array of experience, standing and credibility to the table. And in fact, that he was prepared to make that available to the Sunshine Coast and to this project is testament to the integrity and character of the man. Over the last 6 years, Doug has steadfastly led the Maroochydore City Centre development and has done so in a way that has not sought acclaim, but with a keen eye for opportunity, diligence, professional integrity and exceptional commitment to good governance. I'm the first to admit that he and I have had some very robust conversations over that period of time. And at times, we've had to agree to disagree. But one thing is for certain, no matter what the issue, Doug always had the best interests of Council and SunCentral at the forefront of his thinking. And his principled approach is something that you will go a long way to find in such abundance. Doug was appointed as the inaugural chair of SunCentral Maroochydore Limited on the 30th of March 2015, and he wasted no time in getting down to business. Working with his board, he charted an approach to de-risk the project and led the transformation of the part of the previous golf course to the genesis of a commercial centre which we see today. Under Doug's careful eye, the former Horton Park Golf Club has transformed to develop lots and new buildings, and the city centre is coming out of the ground, and of course we're open for business. During his 6 years at the helm, Doug oversaw the delivery of almost $50 million in high-quality public infrastructure, including roads, pathways, and the first park in the development, Foundation Square. What he also did was provide a stewardship of the point of difference for our new CBD, ensuring we were committed to the delivery of smart technologies that would set Maroochydore apart from other cities in the future. Recognising the inherent need for the project to evolve, Doug and his board put forward the proposal to engage a Tier 1 development partner. Again, this was done in the interest of optimising the outcomes for our council and therefore for our community. With his characteristic understatement and determined approach, Doug oversaw the comprehensive process that secured the development agreement we have today with one of Australia's largest diversified property groups in Walker Corporation. Doug once said to me that it was his aim with this project to put himself out of a job. And while the need for the job still continues, I greatly respect and appreciate Doug's desire to call time now that development partnership with Walker Corporation is in place. Councillors, Dr. Doug McTaggart leaves an extraordinary legacy for this project and for our region and should always be remembered as a great contributor. I also recognise that he leaves some pretty big shoes to fill. However, I'm confident that the recommendations that we're about to consider will provide a great platform to move SunCentral into the next phase of operations. With that in mind, councillors, I want to place on the record our gratitude and our appreciation to Dr. Doug McTaggart and extend to him our very best wishes for what lies ahead and commend this report for your consideration. Thank you. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to endorse the comments that you made in relation to Mr. McTaggart and the team that have brought SunCentral Maroochydore to the situation where it currently is. My question to you, Craig, is there a sunset clause in relation to the membership of this board? And does the charter say how many directors there have to be, and et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, through the Mayor, Councillor, there's not a sunset clause per se for the controlled entity, which is SunCentral Maroochydore Proprietary Limited. The decision you're being asked to make today would look to put the persons who are nominated in place for a further 2 years. The Constitution for SunCentral Maroochydore Proprietary Limited allows for a board of a minimum of 1 director and a maximum of 10 directors. Pardon me, it has been a board of 5 directors since the board was first established in late March 2015. Does that answer your question?
And that's the number we're maintaining?
Through the Mayor, no, Councillor. If the recommendations which are before you today are agreed, that will see a board of 4 directors from 1 May, so from Saturday. And as flagged in the report, given we are in the process of the governance and resourcing review that is presently underway, which you will consider once that review is concluded, the scope remains for you as the owner of the entity to consider whether or not you wish to expand the membership of the entity. In saying that it will move to a board of 4, also noting that that fourth position is not yet does not fall vacant until the 30th of September this year. So that's a further consideration that will need to occur later in the year.
Thank you, Mr. Matheson. I'm not sure whether the public generally understand what a fantastic job Doug McTaggart and his fellow directors, together with the SunCentral employees, did in relation to developing this project and bringing it to the stage where last year it was adopted as the Walker Corporation was adopted as the managing people who are going to run the project through from now on. They've turned, I think the people of Sunshine Coast should be eternally grateful to that board. They've turned a substantial loss-making proposition into something which not only will be a fantastic result, but also a fantastic financial result for this council, for the future of this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Prey.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Ernst, through you. Very well said too, Mr. Mayor. It was highly appropriate, and I think big job. Did a great job. I've just got one question in regard to item E in the recommendation, and that's in regard to the publicly releasing the names. Through the CEO, can you just give us a little bit more detail on how that's done? I'm assuming that they will find out whether this goes through smoothly today. They'll find out sometime today or maybe tomorrow morning. What's the process after that before it can be publicly released, and how long would you expect that to take?
Sure. Through the Mayor, Councillor, the intention would be that the material that is in the confidential attachment can be made public after the resolution is taken by Council. After the resolution is taken by Council to appoint the nominees, our ordinary practice would be that we would issue a media release within the next day or so to announce those appointments.
Thank you. Councillor Law.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and endorse the comments and accolades for SunCentral and its chair over what they've achieved on behalf of the community. But just a note, I think we need to either amend or adjust the resolution because we've got A and B appear to be the same. I think in our updated report that was released that was corrected, but yes, I think in this we need to just tidy that up. I don't think it's an amendment, it just needs fixing.
A deletion. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Landsberg and Councillor O'Prey, you happy with that? As it's now been removed, there was a duplication. Thank you. No further speakers? You don't need to close, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just my apologies for misinterpretation for confidentiality and moving this. Happy to support the recommendation, especially just wishing Dr McTaggart all the best in retirement and also delivering such a huge project, and obviously the decision to go with a Tier 1 developer and remove council from that land delivery model has really taken council's responsibility away and delivered such a wonderful project for Maroochydore CBD. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Landsberg. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Craig. We move to item 8.10, which is the Council of Mayor South East Queensland Waste Management Plan. And again, I draw to your attention that there is a significant confidential report attached to this. And should we need to go into that detail, we'll deal with that at that time. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Last year, the Council of Mayor South East Queensland Waste Working Group was tasked with developing a draft South East Queensland Waste Management Plan. Councillor Dixon, myself and James Rapre represented Sunshine Coast Council in that work group. The draft plan promotes a circular economy approach to managing the region's waste, and it aligns with the outcomes in the Sunshine Coast Waste Strategy. It has a focus primarily on how we can divert waste from landfill through the three main curbside collected waste streams, being commingled recyclables, organics and residual waste from the general waste bin. I think it's important to note that endorsement of the plan would not bind SCC to any financial obligation. Neither would it bind Council to participating in any of the sub-projects that would not directly benefit the Sunshine Coast community. Endorsement would, however, provide access to potential funding opportunities that otherwise may not be available. In terms of the three waste streams that are focused on in the plan, it's looking at the commingled recycling stream, which is by and large glass bottles and jars, paper and cardboard, plastics, steel cans and aluminium cans. We currently collect about 32,000 tonnes a year through our curbside collection services, and we believe we can do much better than that. Secondly, we're looking at organics. Currently we have about 35,000 properties across the region that have an opt-in garden waste bin, and through that service we collect about 10,000 tonnes a year of garden waste, mostly grass clippings and plant prunings. And we're looking at future options, potentially to include food in those bins. The third stream is the landfill bin, and what we can do to reduce the volume of recyclable and reusable waste that is in that bin. Currently we're sending about 140,000 tonnes of curbside collected general waste to landfill, and we need to improve on that if we're to achieve the state's landfill diversion targets. All in all, the current position is that we're collecting 42,000 tonnes of curbside collected waste that is diverted from landfill, but sending 140,000 tonnes to landfill. Why is this the time to be planning for the future and taking this regional approach? Well, we've got a national waste policy and action plan, and we have the Queensland State Waste Strategy that was released in 2019. The Queensland Strategy outlines landfill diversion targets, which are fairly ambitious. By 2025, we're setting a target of a 65% diversion rate for curbside collected waste. To put that into perspective, we're currently sitting in the high 30s and low 40s as a percentage. So overall, from the curbside tonnes, we've got 182,000 tonnes a year at the moment. We're landfilling 140,000 tonnes and recycling 42,000. To put that into perspective, by 2025, the state target would see us reducing that landfilled waste to 63,000 tonnes and recycling 118,000. As I mentioned, that is fairly ambitious, but there are ways of getting there. We do that through alternative waste treatment solutions. We do it through education, community campaigns, and planning for and delivering future needs waste infrastructure, such as a high-tech material recovery facility, organics processing plants, and we also need to progressively restructure our business activities as the current contracts expire to align all these activities. Looking at the low-hanging fruit, this pie chart shows a composition of the average general waste bin throughout the Sunshine Coast region. As you can see from the breakup there, over 55% of the average household general waste bin has organic compostable waste that could be going in a garden waste bin. Another 15% or so is recyclable material that could be going in the yellow lid bin. All in all, more than 73% of the average curbside waste bin contents could be and should be diverted from landfill each year. So based on that large organics component, our initial focus, or the initial focus of the plan, is on diverting the organics from that bin. That will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and it can be processed to produce compost and potentially also energy. We're never going to get 100% of that because we'll never get everybody to do the right thing, but it's very realistic to expect that we could be diverting 50,000 tonnes of organic waste a year and 14,000 tonnes of recyclables, all from landfill, just through that general waste bin. So the draft South East Queensland plan, it's in its finalisation stage. We're now seeking council endorsement of that plan. And once we get endorsement from the 11 councils that are in ComSec, that will go to the ComSec board in the May meeting for final approval. The key enablers for the plan, basically the state waste levy, which is a tax that is put on every tonne of waste that is sent to the landfill. Currently, there's an advance payment to councils that ensures that domestic premises are not subject to that charge. The legislation will change next year, so that domestic rebate will expire in July 2022. It may completely be removed, or it may be progressively removed, but there will be changes as of July next year. The other enablers will be the funding opportunities from federal and state grant programmes that will become available to assist with establishing new infrastructure. And basically the South East Queensland Plan provides a pathway forward and a prioritisation for initiatives. Basically, behaviour change, how do we educate the community to get the right things in the right bins? How do we go about increasing the organics diversion and investing in infrastructure investments such as alternative waste treatment? In terms of collaboration, so why is it a regional plan? Some of these projects will be based on economies of scale. It's simply not financially viable for a council as small as Sunshine Coast to develop thermal treatment options. But what can we do locally? Organics, composting and processing can very much be done locally. That reduces transport costs rather than sending organics to a large facility somewhere else in South East Queensland and then transporting a product back here. We can do that locally and it makes financial sense to do so. Sub-regionally, how do we deal with commingled recyclables? 2 to 3 councils or more may choose to share in a new material recovery facility to process that material, and that's an option that we're currently investigating. Acting regionally at the same time, education programme across South East Queensland. Make sure that everybody in South East Queensland is getting the same message and everybody knows what should be going in what bin. Also regionally, the benefits would be funding negotiations with the state and Commonwealth. As a combined group of councils, we've got a bit more elbow grease. And acting regionally, as I mentioned, large thermal treatment plants for residual waste, such as the Kawana plant in Perth, can only be achieved with significant volumes of waste to keep the cost per tonne down. Kawana processes 400,000 tonnes of waste a year. Sunshine Coast Council, we would hope we can reduce our waste to landfill to under 100,000 tonnes a year. So for processing residual waste financially viably, we'd have to look at a regional solution. Basically, the recommendations are that Council note the report titled Council of Mayors South East Queensland Waste Management Plan, endorse the plan and authorise the Chief Executive Officer to publicly release the Council of Mayors Waste Management Plan once it has been adopted by all member councils.
Somebody to move? Councillor Dixon, thank you. Yes, okay. You happy with that, Councillor? Yep. Have a seconder, thank you. Councillor Suarez, thank you. Would you like to open, Councillor?
Yes, I will. And John, thank you for being so passionate. Given that I've only been involved in this portfolio for the last 12 months, I'm just so surprised and astonished every time I come to a Waste Task Force meeting that you know exactly what you're talking about, you're honest, you're frank, you tell us that hard decisions need to be made and you tell us how you're going to do that. And the same goes for James Rupre as well. Extreme dedication to actually getting on with doing it. And I think the time for talk's gone past. We can't talk about this anymore, and it's not a matter of consulting and hoping we get the best outcome. We actually need to start delivering. And some of the things that I think I can take from public discussions I've had, it's really important to get back to education. If you think about it right now, just think about your local community, and my local community as an example, it's a new greenfield estate, lots of young families living in there, and people buying their first homes. I've actually been having a look at what people have been putting in their bins because I want to know what people are doing. I've found oil containers full of oil in bins. I've found obviously lots of food scraps that are going in bins. Lots of green waste. A lot of people are mowing their lawns. For those that are, thank you very much for doing that. But they're actually putting that green waste in recycle bins and general waste. Now I've got a very small property, 375 square metres. I've got an electric mower. I mow it once a week, and I've got the green bin and I fill it up maybe a quarter for that fortnightly collection. For me, it's about doing the right thing. I might not actually use the full capacity of that bin at the moment, but I know what's coming, and there's an opportunity to get those food organics and garden organics put into a bin, and we need to activate that soon because other councils throughout Australia have been doing this for a long time. And it's the new residents moving up interstate at the moment from Victoria and New South Wales saying, get on and get it done. We've been doing this for years, and why are you so far behind as Queenslanders? That's just one thing, but the education component, getting back into schools and working with young people, it's actually the young people that are teaching their parents. And I've seen this happen before. We need to get back into that space as much as we can. Every school on the Sunshine Coast, even our universities, and start to tell people what you can put in your bin, how those recyclables work, but it's about the education to get to that FOGO option. We talked about regional partnerships. We're not going to do this on our own, and Sunshine Coast Council can't do this on our own, but we've got an extremely large council to our south in Moreton Bay, and we've also got Noosa, who use much of our waste facilities at the moment. The elephant in the room is the state levy though. So there's a state levy, and the impost there is an encouragement to divert from landfill. That's what the state want us to do, and whilst it's noble, the state need to start to stump up. If the council is to start to charge for these new services and potentially go down a compulsory third bin, then I think the state need to start to buy into that space, and if they're serious about those landfill diversion targets, they need to stump up, they need to discount or offer rebates to residents to get in the space, and it would be great if the state government actually started to get involved and just not claw that money out of the local community. Lastly, I'm quite interested in this concept of circular economy. So things that we can recycle and reuse, how about we start to do that and manufacture that here on the Sunshine Coast? Let's not just throw things in the ground, let's not send them overseas. Let's deal with it here in our community and get real smart about that. And again, that's going to take significant investment from council and from the state government and private enterprise. Mr Mayor, the most important thing here today is to talk about getting on the journey, and at every Waste Task Force meeting, I know Councillor Maria and Councillor Joe and Councillor Winston, we're all talking about how we can activate this soon. We want the new waste contract in, we want to get down the path of FOGO, and we want to implement that very, very quickly, but you know, John tells us time and time again that there are steps and stages we need to go through. We need to prime up our contractors, get the services in, get the new trucks, the bins, and obviously those end-of-line facilities as well, build the infrastructure. Mr Mayor, I'm really proud of where we're heading. I know the other partner councils, I think there's 11 of us that are involved in this. We're all really keen to get on with the job, and I actually can't wait for this document to go public. I think if residents in Queensland can see that local councils are ready, we're primed, and we want to do the job, we just need the state government assistance, and I'm hoping councillor mayors can make that happen. Again, to John and his team, I'm really impressed, and I'm learning more at every meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Suarez.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well said, Councillor Dixon. I fully endorse pretty much every comment you made. One comment you made was, you know, talking about the future, our young people looking at this as well. Yesterday I was fortunate enough to attend a school where they were looking at redesigning Coolum, and one of the projects included waste, where the student came up with the idea to paint all the bins bright pink so people would know where they were, and have these automated robots that went around the park and picked up rubbish and put them in those bins. So it's really good that they're thinking of innovative ways. I'd like to thank yourself and James Rapre and the Mayor, the Council, the Concept Waste Working Group for looking at this. It is a big issue. We have ambitious targets, and we do require some collaborative solutions. The work that this group has done, the Waste Working Group have done, is doing this on behalf of our participating councils, and I'm really pleased that Sunshine Coast Council is part of that group, and I look forward to the solution. So thank you again for doing the work.
Thank you, Councillor Suarez. Councillor Natoli.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Great work, John and James and the council mayors. Obviously, waste is going to be one of the biggest challenges for all of us. History is that it's been too easy. Dig a hole, bury it. It's not our responsibility. Producers produce a lot of goods for us to consume, and there's been discussions for 20 plus years that I've been involved with waste about producer responsibilities. I really haven't seen much headway in that area, and we probably end up using too much packaging, which we then find 7% of it is not recyclable. It ends up in landfill. Can it be used? Can it be burnt? Can it produce energies? There's a lot of questions. With all that comes costs. The fact is that homeowners, most homeowners don't really understand how to manage waste. It's going to be a huge challenge for us. Apart from the costs, just to transition people to actually understand how they manage that waste and how it impacts the end outcome, because contamination becomes a real issue for us. The waste stream becomes contaminated. It means that you either have to have more processes in there, the cost increases dramatically, and the solutions to deal with the waste become very complex. And so these challenges, by no means do we think, as much as we can see the future, I still have a lot of apprehension about our ability to be able to deliver the message and educate the community. Sunshine Coast is a very transient community. We have people moving in and out of our region. People work in and out of our region. We have very inconsistent ways that we deal with our waste from each local government area, and I think there needs to be a very central approach of how we do it right across the region, eventually probably right across the country. And we need to standardise that so it's easy for people to understand what their roles and responsibilities are as they manage waste, whether it's in your kitchen or whether you're in a public place. I see so many times that people just do the wrong thing. Whether it's laziness, ignorance, couldn't care, I don't know. Maybe that's a problem that we've got. I counted 90 bottles that I've collected in the last month on my walks. Discarded. Public areas, disgraceful. To see that many bottles, apart from the other waste that I've collected. So if we can't get it right, if people's attitudes don't change to taking responsibility, each person has to accept they are responsible for their waste, whether it's in their car, their homes, in a public area, at work. It's a responsibility, and that responsibility then will help us manage our waste. And that's an enormous challenge that we've got, enormous. So, as much as the government is bringing in levies, it's going to hurt us, it's going to hurt the back pocket of people. I'm also encouraged that, especially in business where they would force businesses to do things differently, actually turned out to be more cost effective for businesses to do it. I think that's part of the solution, that we have to look at how we can use that mechanism to make it much more cost effective for people. So I'm up for the challenge, but I just know that we should never kid ourselves. This is an enormous challenge that we have in our region, and I think it's great that we're working in a collaborative process. I hope that we can find those solutions, and in the end, we just want to see a bit of outcome for our environment.
Thank you, Councillor Natali. Councillor Law.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for an excellent report, and really encouraging to hear the enthusiasm among not only the staff in the offices but also everyone around this table, that we have a huge opportunity to make a great difference here. It will require some leadership, but it will also require, I believe, a great deal of encouragement of our community. So, notwithstanding where this report ends up, I just wonder if you might give us a clue to how long it might be before we can really have a green garden waste bin available for everyone to do something about that 55,000 tonnes that's going in, 55% of the 140,000 tonne that's going into landfill.
We are currently evaluating tenders that have been received for the next generation waste collection contract. That contract will commence in July 2022. We hope that under that contract there will be an opportunity to expand the garden waste service as an opt-out service rather than the current opt-in service. And obviously there'll be certain premises that don't generate garden waste, so it's not going to be mandatory for everybody, but we would like as many properties as we can possibly get to take the service up. So progressively as a garden waste service from July 2022, a significant expansion of the service, and then a progressive transition possibly to a full-go bin if we get the green light to develop a processing facility somewhere within the region.
Thank you very much for that, and really encouraged to hear that response. So I wish to speak in favour of the motion, but really want to highlight the need that this isn't just about council taking away everyone's waste. This is about trying to work with our community to show to them and demonstrate to them what they can do to reduce the biggest emitter of climate change gases that we have on the Sunshine Coast, which comes from our landfill. That is the biggest source of pollution on the Sunshine Coast. It is our greatest opportunity to actually do anything to try and improve our climate, is by every single one of us working together to actually stop material going into landfill, creating climate change gases. We can stop that if we start making different choices today. And it's not just about what council's going to do, it's about what every resident on the coast is going to do. Can we show them and encourage them and help them to make a difference to our whole community and improve our environment at the same time? I hear many conversations, I get a lot of messages, phone calls about what are you doing about our environment? You're just letting more trees be cut down. But actually, if we want to improve our environment and make a big change, it's about everybody doing the right thing about their green waste and making sure it does not go into landfill. 55% of what goes in landfill we could remove if we make the right choice. And I encourage everyone to start making the right choice around that, and together we'll make a huge difference. And I'd just like to share what one community has chosen to do in Yandina. The Yandina Community Garden, they got a small grant funding 12 months ago from federal government. And they set up a food waste loop. And they went round to all the businesses in Yandina. They encouraged them, here's a bin, please can you put your food waste in these bins? 2 different bins depending on what the organic waste was or what the green waste was. They then go round and collect it every week, and they put it in and they're composting it and they're recycling it. They've got flies involved, and it's getting out of my area of expertise, but the flies break down the waste and they produce a product. And subject to getting Environmental Protection Agency approval, they'll actually be able to sell the product. They have removed 12 tonnes of waste from landfill in 1 year. That's one small community organisation with one small grant and a heck of a lot of volunteer hours. Now, I know that we've got a lot of community gardens across the coast. How can we replicate that? How can we help them with some grant funding or find funding from the federal government, from state government, from wherever, to make a contribution to reducing those totals? So there's one community, and we heard comments about the young people doing the right stuff. That's a bunch of young people who've set that up in that community garden. And I'll just leave that with you. They have removed 12 tonnes of organic waste in 1 year, 1 tonne per month. I think that is a stunning outcome and an excellent example of what we can do when community works together. And as well as the big stuff that we're doing on behalf of the whole of the Sunshine Coast, I'd like to try and work with your team, John, James, around how can we do more of this local response to make a local difference and reduce our landfill. So I'm certainly supporting this today so that the Sunshine Coast can make a difference, but really encourage Mr Mayor that this is about all SEQs, regional councils coming together to make a difference. This is something that councils can do to show the right direction of going with our waste management, because we are putting too much stuff in the ground, We used to send it overseas. We can't do that anymore. We've got to deal with our waste, and we've got to do it urgently and do it now. So thank you very much for what you're doing, and I certainly support the motion today.
Thank you, Councillor Law. Councillor Babarowski.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I guess I think this is one of those examples of us putting real substance behind our aspiration to be the most sustainable region in Australia, healthy, smart and creative. But this is where we recognise that we can't do it alone. And I think we are taking the community with us. We may even be, to some extent, lagging a little bit behind at least some in the community. And I was wondering when I was reading through this whether we should help them understand the carbon footprints of each of the options. And in the thermal example, it is mentioned a little bit about the various different processes and what their emissions are. But I think we could probably, in a review or a future iteration of the South East Queensland Waste Management Plan, look at the carbon implications of more of these options in more detail. I suspect that I actually really strongly believe that post-COVID, the number one issue for human communities globally will be understanding, better understanding climate change and what its implications are for all of us, and this is a key component of it. So I just encourage us and encourage the working group to look at that aspect and bring those quantums and those statistics out more clearly so that we can help people understand how this contributes to that, what we can do about it, and how we maturely approach waste management into the future. But I strongly support the recommendations today and do believe that we are maturing in this space very well.
Thank you, Councillor Babarowski. No further speakers. I'll go to Councillor Dixon to close.
Mr Mayor, a fair bit of enthusiasm, which is fantastic, and I just want to remind the CEO and James Rupre to capitalise on this opportunity that you've got right here. And I've sat through a council and I've actually been regretful in my previous decision not to enter this space sooner. Capitalise on the opportunity you've got right now. You've got a council and a community, and we've just seen the community results of the recent waste survey. We've gone out and we've asked our community many different questions and had enormous responses, more than anything else I've seen. The community are excited, they want action now, and they want us to show leadership. Please capitalise on this opportunity to get what you need done, because the politicians and councillors in this room, we are keen to do it. And to the community out there interested, know that we are interested too, and that we want to get on this journey with you. Again, the excitement is encouraging today, and let's do everything we can to go on this journey together. And I think capitalise on the opportunity for Queensland councils to work together, to tell the state government we need them to get involved, we need the federal government to get involved, and we need to make some serious changes. And as Councillor Natoli said, a lot of this starts at the supermarket, and this starts with the manufacturers. Again, a lot of energy needs to be put into that space, because if we can actually curb the waste streams from that initial development phase, the product manufacturing actually helps us on the ground, and it helps the environment. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, I have a statement to make regarding a prescribed conflict of interest. And whilst I appreciate that Council has already made its decision on agenda item 8.1 prior to my arrival at today's meeting, I still have an obligation to notify you that under section 150EL (3) of the Local Government Act 2009, I have a prescribed conflict of interest in matters associated with the Sunshine Coast Lightning, on the basis that I have received gifts with a cumulative value of approximately $8,342 from the Sunshine Coast Lightning and the Melbourne Storm, which is one of the owners of the Sunshine Coast Lightning, since the 5th of April 2016, which is my relevant term for the purpose of section 155EG (1) of the Act. Those gifts are all declared in my published register of interests, and all involve tickets and hospitality received from either the Sunshine Coast Lightning to attend some of their matches in the Suncorp Super Netball League, or from the Melbourne Storm to attend some of their matches in the National Rugby League competition. Both of these parties stood to benefit from or be disadvantaged by the decision which Council made on agenda item 8.1 earlier today. Given the Sunshine Coast Lightning is the direct beneficiary of the sponsorship arrangement proposed in the report, and the Melbourne Storm is the part owner of the Sunshine Coast Lightning. In accordance with section 155EK of the Local Government Act 2009, I will exclude myself from participating in any future decision on this matter whilst the prescribed conflict of interest may exist. I note in item 9 we have no notices of motion. Yes, Councillor?
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
I often applaud you for the way you manage your conflicts of interest, and again, another fine example of that. I'm just interested in when you've got a legitimate reason for not being, as you had this morning, for not being in the meeting, why is it that you need to declare post the item's decision?
Well, Megan, I might allow her to answer that for you.
Sure. As the Act currently stands, Councillor, as soon as you become aware of an interest, you are required to notify the CEO if it's outside of the statutory meeting process, and then you are required to notify Council at the next meeting. So the Mayor is doing that. He had previously notified the CEO, and he's now notifying Council today.
Which was the next meeting. No notices of motion, which is great. Thank you. We've been meeting for about a year, and that's a significant improvement on where we were. What it says is that people are prepared, they're thinking ahead, they're dealing with matters in advance and not loading up officers with short-term challenges that distract them from the main game, which I think is important. So I appreciate that. I note also there are no petitions today, and we have no need to go into confidential session. So on that note, I'll close the meeting at 12:41, and thank you all very much for your attendance today. Thank you.